Everybody. Oh, that was not unexpected. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here on this third and final day of the IPI World Congress. Great to see all of you, and welcome, I think, to this very important panel, which is focusing on mental health and the duty of care in newsrooms towards journalists. We're very lucky to have Mar Cabra here, who is one of the co-founders of the Self-Investigation, which is a nonprofit focused on looking at journalists' mental health and promoting good practices in newsrooms. And she's going to lead this discussion today. Many of you might have been in the workshop with her yesterday, but we have three excellent panelists with us today. So again, thanks to all of you for being here. I know it's an early Friday morning, so we appreciate that. And Mar, please take it away. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Scott. Can you hear me? Yes. Muchas gracias. I'm really excited to be here and that IPI put this topic in the agenda. Thank you to all for coming as well, given all the changes. This is a miracle panel because two of our panelists were stuck in Vienna because their plane couldn't land. So I'm glad that we were able to make it happen today. So just to make sure that you all know where you all know you're here because you want to and you know where you are at. Duty of care in action, how newsrooms prioritize mental health. This is the topic that we're going to be talking about today. And the reason why this is an important panel and I'm very excited that we're talking about this is because journalists' mental health has been a taboo for so long. I remember that when I was a TV journalist, I took 6 months leave for depression in 2008. And what I was told is never talk about this, hide this from your CV. At the same time, a lot of my colleagues in the newsroom in TV in Spain were telling me, you know, undergoing the same situation you are. I'm taking antidepressants, I'm taking anti-anxiety medication. This is very tough and I cannot speak up about it. However, the situation has changed a lot since then, and the pandemic has had a positive effect, at least one positive effect, which is that we put the spotlight on mental health because mental health was one of the top challenges that the journalists were facing. And I don't think it's just because the pandemic was very stressful for us journalists as we were frontline responders. It also has to do with the fact that for the first time, we allowed ourselves to speak about it. So 4 years later, we're actually here talking about this, and we're going to be highlighting and showcasing the work of 3 media organizations who are prioritizing mental health of their staff. And we're here to talk about specifics on how to tackle this from the newsroom perspective. And it's very interesting, this panel, right? Because we have people from different profiles. You see their titles there, right? But I really think it's interesting to understand that in order to provide holistic support to journalists and editors in our media companies, we need different roles involved, right? And we have Beata Balagova, who is editor-in-chief at SME. And SME is a major independent daily and news site in Slovakia. So Beata is representing, you know, the head of a media organization. And she's going to talk to us about what are the challenges and solutions that they're doing at SME. But Beata, before we go into what you do at your media company, I wanted to understand and ask you, why do you think is mental health an urgent issue for journalists?
Because I have seen a lot of young journalists, especially women, leaving and quitting the job because they thought the job is not suited for them. But it was the approach to mental health which wasn't suited well to the times we are living.
And, you know, it's interesting that you mentioned that. One of the things that they tell us more and more in the trainings that we do at the Self-Investigation, and we've trained more than 10,000 journalists from all over the world, is I don't see myself growing old in this profession. So thank you for bringing that point. And we also have Lynn Paulo, who actually comes from HR. She's the head of learning and development at Volant Media. And for those of you who don't know, Volant Media is an independent media company based in the UK that broadcasts for Iran and Afghanistan through their TV channels and radio channels. So Lynn, from your perspective, why is mental health an urgent issue in journalism?
For us personally is because of working from HR side, is seeing how many people have gone off sick, who have been struggling but didn't know what it was. And neither did we, you know, somebody's just been signed off work and then eventually it's stress. And a lot of it was PTSD. So this is not even just what's happened now where they are, but actually what's been building over a period of time as well. So from us, it was a big wake-up call when we were looking at our sickness absence was becoming an issue. And that's when we realized there's something here and we need to do something urgent. Yeah, we could, you know, from a cost perspective, but just from a well-being of our staff, because it impacts everybody. We were seeing, you know, staff who were being upset by the fact that their own colleagues were so unwell, and feeling quite isolated. So, you know, there's a number of things, but it was around people were getting unwell.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. We also have with us Jean-Marc Mojon, and Jean-Marc works at Agence France-Presse, and his title is Global News Safety Manager. But that's a big title that unpacks many parts that he coordinates. He's working on physical, mental, and cybersecurity strategies worldwide. Jean-Marc, from your perspective, why is mental health an urgent issue?
So I come from more than 20 years of field reporting, mostly in conflict zones. And you would never go to a conflict zone without your flak jacket. And I've realized it doesn't make any more sense to go to a conflict zone without caring about your mental health. It's the same level of risk exposure.
So we're seeing here young people saying, I don't want to be a journalist or quitting. We also have sick leaves, constant sick leaves, and bigger, and issues such as post-traumatic stress disorder, but also high levels of burnout, anxiety, depression. And then we're also seeing, this is the great point that you're making about how to go into conflict zone and the effect that war conflicts have on our own mental health, and how we really need to tackle that as well as alongside the physical safety. Let me tell you a little bit more about how we're going to be structuring this panel. We have about 75 minutes together, a bit less now. And the idea is that we get to talk about challenges in more depth, and we get to talk about their solutions, the solutions of their 3 media companies. But we also understand that there are people in the room who are trying out things, and we would love to hear from you. So at some point in the session, I'm going to give the mic to you all and see if anybody wants to share what you are doing in your newsrooms. And then, of course, there will be a part for Q&A. Just note that this session is being recorded and is being live streamed. So I want to say hello to everybody who's following the live stream, but just have that in mind as well as you share things later, that's we're completely on the record here, and it will stay in YouTube for a long time. I wanted to start with a quote that is really, to me, it really spoke to me. Let me just tell you that I have a background as an investigative journalist. I used to work for the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists doing cross-border collaborations, worked in big investigations such as the Panama Papers, which led us to winning the Pulitzer Prize. And I burnt out, and I didn't know what was happening to me. As Lynn was saying, I didn't know how to name what was happening to me, but I quit journalism, and I'm one of those who quit journalism and haven't come back. I don't have any desire to come back, but I do believe to do active journalism. But since most of you have passion about reporting and doing the journalism, my goal now, my mission is to prevent all of you from quitting. And this quote really spoke to me at one point in my life, and I wanted to share it with all of you. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. This quote is by American writer and professor Audre Lorde, and it speaks to me to the fact that we need to be well in order to do our jobs best. Let's dig deeper then into these challenges, because of course we have different people like Central Europe, UK, but exile media, connections with Iran, Afghanistan, AFP everywhere, and, having a major role in the conflicts and covering the conflicts that we have right now. So let's talk a little bit more about the challenges, right? And maybe let's start with you, Jean-Marc, because this conference has had a great focus on Gaza, the conflict in Gaza, and highlighting the amazing work that Gazan journalists are doing, and also the amazing work some big media companies are doing, trying to cover this conflict. So what are the main challenges you've been facing around the mental health of your journalists around this conflict, Gaza conflict, but also others in the recent years? Because let's not forget about the conflict in Ukraine and some others that you've been covering.
It's a long list of challenges. And Gaza is a bit, it's an extreme case. You know, the entire agency has been affected by the conflict in Gaza. Obviously, on the front line, our staff in Gaza, we had, when the war started on October 7th, we had 11 staff journalists based full-time in Gaza, all of them from Gaza. And their mental health, to be honest, the crisis was on a scale where it was almost secondary at first. The focus was to try and keep them alive and then get them out of Gaza, because that's what they all wanted to do. They have families, and that took months to achieve. And it's actually only a month ago that we got the last one of them out. And it's only now really that we are starting to structure our response in terms of mental health. And that is, of course, a huge challenge. Whatever existing systems we had in place at AFP are probably not adequate to deal with what our Gazan staff have been experiencing in Gaza in recent months. So we have to think of something new. So that's already a challenge. I think usually what you find with people who've been through that level of stress, that intense a conflict in their home country, they tend to see the world in two categories: the people who were there with them and the people who weren't. And any mental health response and support program, I think, would have to come from Palestinian practitioners and people who can actually understand what they've been through, because no matter how many hours you spend working on that story from elsewhere, you can't really understand if you weren't there. So that's the response that we're still building now, because our staff is scattered in different parts of the region now that they're out with their families. Some of them are in Qatar, some of them are in Egypt, in Cyprus, in England. And it's going to be a long and complicated process to find adequate ways of giving them the support they need. But there are lots of other people at AFP who were affected by the war in Gaza. We've sent, I think since October 7th, AFP has sent more than 120 journalists to reinforce our regional setup. That was either mostly to the Jerusalem Bureau, but also to our regional desk in Cyprus and other parts of the region, also to Lebanon. And everyone's been impacted by this war in different ways. And there's all the staff, all the editing staff in Paris, London, and other places. They've been subjected to violent images on a daily basis for months now. And we find that it's been overlooked over the years. The level of trauma that you can be exposed to when you're just on a photo editing desk, for example. You're looking at a screen, usually it's quite a large screen of really violent, gory images all day long. And we found that a lot of our staff in those positions don't feel legitimate to talk about their stress. And looking after them has been a challenge too, because it's hard to detect when someone is suffering, because very often their instinct is not to talk about it. They don't feel legitimate. They'll say, well, our colleagues are still in Gaza. Who are we to complain about our mental health now, to raise our hands and say we need support, because we need less support than someone else currently does elsewhere in the network. And that can affect dozens and dozens of people across our network. So we've seen a lot of those issues too, and it's a real challenge because you don't always understand that someone in Hong Kong can be really badly affected, really negatively affected by this coverage. You're just looking at Gaza and Jerusalem, and there's enough to do, that it's easy to sort of say, well, we'll deal with this later. So that's been one of the main challenges, just the sheer volume, the intensity of the violence, and the number of people involved in this coverage in recent months. I could go on with the list of challenges, but that's the main.
Let me understand then, has it been different from other conflicts like Ukraine, for example? Did it pose similar challenges to you?
There have been differences. I think I've been with AFP for almost 25 years. I don't remember. I was talking about that figure of 120 people that we sent from different parts of the world to reinforce our setup in the Middle East. I think that's a first. I don't remember any kind of coverage generating that level of mobility inside the agency, reinforcements for our wider Jerusalem setup, coming from as far afield as Latin America and East Asia, South Africa, just to make up the numbers, because there was such a high volume of work to be done and rotations to sort of keep going. So that's more intense than what we saw at the beginning of the war in Ukraine. And the fact that we couldn't access the field in Gaza, and we couldn't physically support our staff there, made everyone also feel a bit inadequate. We had our staff, and we've known many of them have worked with AFP for more than 20 years. And when I was based in Jerusalem, many of them was already there. And so that they are people that we've known for years, and we couldn't get to them to help them with our own work, but also physically with logistics, with equipment, and guarantee their safe exit. It took months to get them out, and using all kinds of different channels. And it made everyone also feel pretty bad that we couldn't do more. In Ukraine, we were able to get people out if they wanted to, and bring people in. So there was something a bit more natural, although it was incredibly, and still is incredibly, violent and a new kind of conflict, the worst that we've seen in a while, that is constantly challenging our security protocols. At least we were able to relieve the pressure when there was pressure by bringing in new people and moving our setup as the war evolved. And that's something we couldn't do in Gaza. So in that sense, yes, an unusual scenario.
Thank you, Jean-Marc. And if you can put your mic a bit closer, just in case, because I think we all have it closer, but I think you can hear him well, right? But just so for the recording, I guess. Thank you. Lynn, you represent a media company that does media in exile, and that brings additional challenges. In addition, Volant Media has been receiving physical threats, both to some of your journalists in the UK and to your London headquarters. This has been publicly reported in the news. So how are you addressing mental health support in these situations?
It's the thing is, we had started to look into mental health, which was the great thing before things really got bad. So we've always known that Volant Media is considered an enemy of the state, right? Because of the news that we broadcast, and our journalists have always been under threat to the point of their families. So they're exiled, they can't go back, to their families that get detained, trying to put pressure on them. So we already knew there was an issue, and we're starting to address it, as well as I mentioned, increased sickness or people being signed off for stress. That was a word that was coming through in the end on these sickness notes, and we had to look into it. And we approached yourselves, the self-investigation, because we thought we really need to start looking at it. And then all of a sudden, the threat escalated overnight to to the point of we had to shut down our broadcasting out of the UK, which is our head office, because we were told by the government we have to. That's how high the threat actually was. They're putting protocols for us initially for a month, and I think from when the self-investigation first came and spoke to us to actually running the first circle of care just to get people to talk about it, just overnight. And so the challenge, we found ourselves having to evolve very quickly. So we brought in a program and then we had to send people home. And that was devastating to them because in a similar way as Jean-Marc has said, this is also their home country. So not being able to do a job where they have a real, this is not just about a job and a journalist and wanting to report, but you're talking about your home country and your family and how they've been affected. And now you've been told you can't do any work. And we weren't set up for people to work from home. You know, the newsroom is the newsroom, you come in, it's a physical job.
Because you're at TV.
We're
mostly.
TV, yes. And evolving now, social media is now one of our bigger ones. And so, you know, we brought you guys in, we've run programs, well-being programs, and we still have the tip because the threat, we moved offices and our security setup is incredible in terms of, but I think in some ways that's triggering for some people because it's a reminder of what they've left behind. For our non-Iranian or Afghan colleagues, that's triggering because in the UK, that's not a setup we are used to being in. So, you know, it goes across from our journalists, even across our non-journalists because of that threat. Just over a month ago, we had one of our journalists who was stabbed in London in a pretty wealthy suburb in the UK as well. And, you know, we can't say who did it, but that sent an additional threat and worry to people. So we are having to evolve in terms of how the things that we put into place to deal with that on a constant thing. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And it's worrisome, right, to see that you're not safe even in the UK, right? And I think that has caused a lot of stress to your staff as well, as you were mentioning. Beata, you work in Central Europe, which is an area that is becoming increasingly difficult for journalists to do their work, even for prime ministers to do their work, right? And not just because of the physical safety aspects, but also because of the rise in online violence and hate, and especially towards women. And when we were preparing this panel, you really wanted to highlight this point because you've been seeing many women journalists wanting to quit or quitting because of that. So can you tell us more about what's happening on that note?
Yes. When first time we discussed this panel, I was about to speak about hate campaigns directed at female journalists. And these campaigns, we understood, were even financed by Russian disinformation sources. One of these campaigns resulted in one of the best television reporters, Zuzana Kovačić-Hanzelová, deciding to take a break because even one state politician was involved spreading lies about her, that she had abortions, and they were threatening to release a fake video about showing her in a garage being involved in some sexual acts. And that was really something which created so much fear. And I wanted to say how we were warning really the society that already that all the tension reminded the times before the murder of Jan Kuciak, my colleague, and it was in the air. And I wrote several stories when I explained that hate, once let out to the society, you cannot treat it like a war dog. It's not like you point at someone and the hate you pump into the society will attack only journalists. And then our prime minister was assassinated. He received 5 shots. He survived. He's still in the hospital. But suddenly the hate got different dimension because journalists were to be blamed. And several politicians, governmental politicians, some very openly, some between the lines, suggested that it is because the hate journalists were spreading and the criticism of Prime Minister that resulted in that violence. Now you can imagine that it's a collection of all kinds of challenges that emerged in the society. Firstly, like everybody started a self-reflection. And for journalists who were doing their work, because our Prime Minister was really indicated in corruption cases, he really started speaking to the most extreme parts of the society. His government started cooperating with disinformation sources, started pressuring free media, and that criticism was legitimate. But after the assassination trial, suddenly there was a pressure in a society that even journalists should apologize to Robert Fico, because creating an atmosphere in which someone felt that it's okay to shoot him. The other aspect was that several people felt that now it's in their hand to be the justice, and that they can even, they are legitimate to attack journalists. Every day I receive an email which says, "You bitch killed Fico, the Prime Minister." Several of my colleagues are really started thinking if this wave of hate increases, like how safe we are. And another aspect is that even within the journalistic community, there started to be some fights, like who was the most aggressive towards Prime Minister. And I felt that the very basic of journalistic mission, the watchdog role, is now being questioned. And to add to that, it's still valid that even in this situation, very large part of the attacks are focused at female journalists, at women. And my experience is that when I talk to some male colleagues and I tell them, "Oh, I received a hate message," they think they know what I am talking about. But when I show them the message, they suddenly say, "Oh my God, I didn't know, this is so bad." And when I realized this, I felt that it's really time to speak out more about what female colleagues are facing, because it's beyond understanding of the large part of the society in intensity, in the nastiness and the personal aspect of the hate that we receive. And as you mentioned, Slovakia is a European Union country. The European Union just passed the Media Freedom Act, which is supposed to provide more protection for journalists. So this is really such a sensitive time in Slovakia, and we are in the middle of so much pressure, which can even somehow change the definitions of the work we are doing if we are not strong enough and we are not there to explain to the public that there is what are the differences, going back to the basics. What are the differences between hate speech and critical journalism? What is the difference between me saying that the Prime Minister is oppressing free media and someone saying that journalists are dirty anti-Slovak prostitutes? And I am trying to navigate this very difficult situation within my newsroom as well. And I have a lot of conversations with several of my colleagues. And I just now recall that a couple of weeks before the murder, I had this conversation with my esteemed colleague, Matúš Kostolný from Deník N. And we were just saying that this will result in a tragedy, that mounting violence that we experience in our newsrooms. And when I thought about tragedy, I thought about something more intense than a couple colleagues deciding that this job is not for me. but we had not thought, nobody had thought that it's the prime minister. And if you imagine, prime minister has his bodyguards, but we journalists don't have any kind of strong personal protection, not in Slovakia, because that wasn't an issue for such a long time.
And just to put some context into what you're saying, when surveys have been done by UNESCO, ICFJ, or even IWMF, the figures are staggering. 73% of women journalists have experienced online violence, and 1/3 of women journalists consider leaving the profession due to online attacks. So that speaks, those are some data that speaks to what you're saying. But I guess these are studies from a couple of years ago, reports from a couple of years ago. I guess what you're saying is probably if we were to do these reports again, we would find it more difficult.
Just maybe one more comment that a female journalist from Slovakia, Monika Todová, was a victim of one of the very first deepfake videos in Europe. And again, she was picked because her critical journalism, and also she's a member of the LGBTQ community. So you can imagine the type of hate she receives on a daily basis.
Thank you for sharing that, and also for sharing your own personal experience. I'm really sorry that since we last spoke, actually, the situation has escalated for you personally, which leads me to maybe going into solutions, right? What are you doing? And I wanted to ask you then first about what are you doing personally to cope with this situation?
In the very first move, we asked our colleagues after the assassination trial, we recommended our colleagues to work from home. But we remember it from COVID times, that's not a solution. Because in isolation, journalists are getting even more stressed out and even more nervous. But even before the assassination, my first step was sharing really my own personal story. That was the very first time when I publicly speak up. And I just like you, I told and explained my colleagues that I am taking anti-anxiety medication and I have panic attacks when things in the public sphere get rough. And I remember after that confession, one by one, my colleagues came to my office. My next step was talking to some senior journalists, unfortunately mostly males, and explaining them that we should stop pushing through the narrative that it's part of our job. Because even in the newsroom, I noticed that excellent investigative journalists who really did the most, they covered mafia stories and they got a lot of threats. They would tell younger colleagues or even female colleagues, but just sip it in, digest it, and that's part of our job. And so my next step was to explain that even for them at some level, they need to think about it, what all that hate and threats are doing to them. And when I did it, I realized that even they came to me and shared some of the attacks they received. And when we spoke about it, we realized that some of even the health issues they had might have been linked to these attacks. And just one example that one of the most excellent regional journalists, because regional journalism is overlooked so often, the editor-in-chief, 47-year-old guy, went out for a run and he collapsed dead. And before that, he always complained, oh, I have so much pressure on my chest, but it's stress. And it was a question of 3 weeks if he got an appointment to a cardiologist, but he didn't make it. So it was a huge loss for regional journalism in Slovakia. At that time, he was covering the corruption of a regional politician who was very aggressive. He very aggressively attacked his newspaper. And we just connected the points that if we spoke to him more often, and if he was more aware of all the even health checks that journalists should get guaranteed by their employee, and that we should press on them, just go and get checked. So that could not have happened. Then again, the next problem is that our rooms, and our editorial room is in a big shared building when there are many other offices. So anybody who wants to get to the newsroom can do, because there is just one magnetic card separating the world from our newsroom. And I opened up the discussion that we should invest much more, even the physical safety of our newsroom. And it was already an issue after the murder of Jan Kuciak. And then somehow we decided that we are safe, and we now experience a sort of backlash, because I think that already at the time we should have installed some more secure entry, and we will have to do it, just because I think even if journalists are feeling that there is a physical barrier for people to get to the room, they might be safer.
So important, the points that you're making about the importance of physical safety. Also, it's connected that you feel safe with, you feel mentally safe, right? And at the same time, you're also talking about the fact that we don't know how to identify the signs. We don't talk about it. It's been such a stigma for so long, and especially people in the top need to lead the way. So I want to commend you for doing that and speaking about your vulnerability and the challenges that you're facing, because that also, it leads people to open up and say, I can do it. Like, I can do it too. I can speak about it. And the importance of having all those spaces to share and talk about how we're doing, not just what we're doing.
We also had one of the first joint a therapy session. We were very afraid of doing it. Because individually we make it possible for colleagues to call a phone number, and we have a psychologist help that the company pays. But we had this shared session, and suddenly, when journalists from different departments, not only investigative journalists, but even a cultural reporter, started sharing their experiences, suddenly there was a whole list of possible triggers that can make you unsafe, that can start the process of you changing your mind if you want to stay in that job. It was very, very useful thing.
So important, and also so important. That's why we're here today talking about it as a way to normalize the conversation, and important to create those spaces. And you were referencing to them earlier, Lynn, about how at Volant Media you actually started doing some, what we call that the self-investigation circles of care, right? Which is creating these safe spaces where you can talk about how you're feeling. And there's a power, as Beata was saying, of hearing other people and saying, he or she is undergoing the same things I'm going through. Oh, I'm not alone, right? Because you normally tend to think there's something wrong with me, right? I used to think like, why am I the only person in the Panama Papers team that burnt out? And like, why me? Oh, there must be something wrong with me. And the reality is others burnt out, but in silence, right? So tell us more about what you have been doing at Volant Media, specifically because I think I want to say something, which is I think I know very well the cases of AFP and Volant Media because we work with them. And I think I want to commend both of your organizations as well, because you provide great employee assistance programs, great support for therapy, or like hotlines to call, which is kind of like a given, or it should be a given in our media organizations, right? Beyond that, what have you done?
So I just want to pick up on that point on the circle of care, because that's where we started. We had never done it, just brought people into the room. And it was surprising what came out of it, even us as an organization who knew, and then ran that, even further, because apart from just the security, there were cultural differences as well. And I think the first thing it did was there was an appreciation of each other. I was in a session where I was in tears because there was a journalist who I know very well, and when I heard the horrific treatment he had had and how he had been tortured, and you just don't know what people are going through. And so in HR, apart from sickness, where there's constant complaints about somebody's behavior, it's also because they don't know, it bubbles up and it manifests in different ways, right? So from shortness in their tolerance to somebody. So it was starting to feel like a bit of them and us. So I just want to address that it helped from that cultural perspective as well when we were doing that. And we have all those programs where you said, we even have a Farsi counselor because we know that there's a language barrier. As well, we are training mental health first aiders in the business. We're going to be bringing in an on-site counselor. And we have all that. We have an HR team who's supporting. We're talking about it more, running campaigns where we're trying to normalize that conversation around mental health, that people can be open, because as you said earlier, there is a stigma. And the culture in the newsroom, like, as Bertha was saying, male colleagues, it's almost like a badge of honor, and you just suck it up. And if you can, that kind of thing, then that's what we just do. So you're trying to break down all that stereotype. And it sometimes feels like one step forward, because but whilst we're telling people and we're supporting them, and we're trying to lead from the top. Our program was quite interesting in that for most programs, we lead from the top down because it has to be mirrored. With our one, as you know, we did it from the bottom up because what we wanted the people on the ground to really make senior management understand what was, what they feeling and what was going on. And you taking that step forward, but at the same time, and giving training, you also have to give them training on security and asset attacks and emergency first aid. And you're thinking, like you said again, we're based in London. These are not conversations that you tend to have. So, like I say, in one stage, you're almost showing the benefits and you feel like it. And then all of a sudden you have to pull somebody into training and have counterterrorism officers come in and do training with you. And then again, if you were feeling okay, it brings it right back to the front of how real that threat is, and the threat to their families as well. So there's that, as well as feeling helpless because we constantly, or we get that message that my family, and we ask them to share that with us, like, my family's been detained, their assets have been frozen, they're trying to put pressure, and we do everything. They're feeling helpless. They're in a real catch-22 situation, especially our Iranian and our Afghanistan colleagues, to be in that. So it's like I said, it's constantly having to evolve. But our biggest thing is the education, the understanding, the spotting signs. And I think it's more important that, which is why we're bringing in the mental health first aiders, is that colleagues can spot it, as well as management, who are key to all of this, around those one-to-ones. But we know, because the news is fast-paced, breaking news, those conversations are very short. And it's normally what we find, and it's a constant uphill. It's not just about performance. Get to know your team a little personally, that you can spot it. So it's trying to get that, if the mental health first aiders, apart from them having several people, so constantly around them that they can turn to, is that maybe that others will spot it probably before you spot it yourself. So that's a real key thing, is trying to get as many people to really understand what are the signs and symptoms of it. And I think it's really interesting in that I'm not a journalist, but having come out of COVID and that when we were doing a session around signs and symptoms with yourself, I spotted some signs in myself. I didn't go into full burnout, but I recognized that lack of sleep. And then you realize that I was working in a way that was probably putting pressure on my team because of how I was operating, that sending emails at all hours of the night. So our biggest thing is education. How do we, apart from have people trained to recognize symptoms, but trying to normalize and be talking about it through our different campaigns, that there's nothing wrong, and actually speaking up about having an issue, and it doesn't have to be the worst, just at the starting point, or how I might be feeling, or not even sure how I'm feeling, is not a weakness, but actually a strength to speak up, because it's always felt like you're weak if you speak up, or if you're struggling, if you can't handle the stress like everybody else seems to be, which probably we know they're probably not all handling it. they're just well at disguising it.
And so important, right? To understand that in order to create a cultural change, which is what we need, and we're changing beliefs, we're changing like a culture of how it's always been done, but maybe it's not how it's supposed to be done. It also requires new skills, right? Because I don't know about you. I know that probably you didn't learn about this at school and the journalism school, and many of the people that I've been talking to have never learned about anything related to mental health awareness, right? And you're talking about something very interesting, which is the power of management, right? And how managers are key in the change. And I think that when we look at the World Health Organization recommendations on how to tackle mental health at work, that is one of the first things they recommend, right? Which is train the managers, not just the middle managers, but the top managers, right? And I'm glad that you're doing that. And at the same time, I'm going to put my journalist hat on, and critical hat is like, oh, but that costs money. I don't have money. I'm in a media organization with no money. Is this an issue of money, tackling mental health?
So no. Well, yes, definitely. So yes and no. Yes, when you bring in specialized help, as we did with yourselves, because no one was equipped or trained in it. So there is that, but there are the simple wins, which was what we were trying to do anyway, in terms of just have a meeting, have those one-to-one sessions, actually have team meetings as well, because you're building that. I think people were very much working in isolation, and to some extent there's a competitiveness. So, the lack of sharing amongst each other. And those were kind of things that we were just tackling. So those are quite straightforward. The campaigns we're running in-house, and we get the staff to do it, and because you get more buy-in if people feel they're part of something, right? So actually there isn't a cost from the basic of basic, which is the key, which is management. There is no cost. Training them, yes, specifically. And I think one of the challenges around managers, I don't think it's that they don't want to do it. One, there's shortage of time. That's the big thing we hear is time. But also there's a fear, because people, they know it's such an important subject that when they have had their stuff, and what we realized that actually people were saying stuff, sometimes a little, around about, and then some saying it quite straightforward, I'm really stressed, I'm not coping. The managers didn't know how. There was a fear that they'll do it wrong. What do I say in this instance? And actually, I don't think you need training for that. You just needed to be empathetic, because what they were doing was almost avoiding that person. So less one-to-one time with that person, because they were feeling uncomfortable, because they felt they didn't feel equipped to be able to help them. Instead of feeding that up and we give you the help and support you need, but actually just talking to somebody, and somebody sitting in front of you, and it might be a bit uncomfortable. We're quite uncomfortable with emotion as human beings. And so if somebody starts crying, I think, they weren't hand. So they were shying away from it even when they knew it was happening, because they didn't know, and they didn't want to make it worse. So they were too scared to say the wrong thing, but not realizing just listening was going to help, just allowing people to offload in that moment. You can't change it necessarily, because some of the issues that were really stressing them is what's happening to their family at home. So not necessarily what's happening in the newsroom, but what's happening at home in Iran, and their family's been detained or whatever. So we can't do anything about that, but having somebody just to be heard and known that I'm not alone in this is what we are trying to make sure that they now understand. There's formal training on signs and symptoms, and the right way, and how to direct people, because we're not training them to be counselors or therapists. We want to train them how to know how to direct them in the right, this is the support we have. My door is always open. You can speak to me at any time. So I'll say no, there isn't a cost at the most basic level, and that's where it counts, is at the management level.
Yeah, the power of listening.
Yes.
Like we're trained as listeners in journalism, but how do we apply that to listen to our colleagues? How do you do that at AFP? What are the actions that you're taking?
Well, on the cost issue first, I mean, it's the what you get for your money is worth it. You know, I think, I don't know who, is it a Mark Twain quote or something? If you think education is expensive, try ignorance. You know, so it's the same thing here. And I think you have the figures about for every dollar spent on mental health, you know, you get $6 cut from your losses from sick leave. So it's a good investment. Is that right? It's something like that. Okay. So there's no doubt that it's a good investment. And money hasn't at AFP really been the issue. It's the issue has been finding programs and trainings that are well suited to such a diverse population. There are more than 3,000 journalists at AFP, scattered over 100 and something, 160, 170 countries. So you have lots of different profiles, different ages, and that is a factor. The generational issue. I mean, I'm 47. I grew up in this job with a lot of my role models in conflict reporting in particular, whose approach to mental health was to finish the bottle of whiskey. And so now the new generation is quite different. They are very happy to talk about mental health issues in general, but all of these people still work together in the same company. So finding there is no one size fits all, and that's, I think, you know, the hotline is great. It's an institutional response to the mental health issue. It should be there. It's available. But to give you an example, and that they won't mind me mentioning them, I was based in Iraq for 5 years, and talking about mental health to a middle-aged Iraqi man is not easy. How do you put that topic on the table? You can't just invite them to a group therapy session. You can't start an open conversation in the office, and any emails you send saying this resource is available will be ignored. So you have to find other ways. And you know, so yeah, that's another factor to deal with. And then there's all the different types of jobs. And I mentioned that a little bit earlier. It was very interesting at AFP to see all the different cases. Last year, almost a year ago, just over a year ago, actually, my colleague Arman Soldin was killed in Ukraine. Arman was born in this city, actually, in 1991. And he was a very special character, loved by a lot of people. And he'd worked in lots of different bureaus already in the network, in the AFP network. He worked in Rome, in London. And the diversity of ways in which people in all parts of the world were affected, you know, just suddenly revealed the scope of the care that needed to be given to all these different people in the company. Some of them, you know, from someone who was with him when he was killed to someone who had worked with him years ago in Rome, but is now based in Hong Kong. You know, how can you respond to all of those needs at the same time? And not everyone needs to see or talk to a therapist. Someone just feels deeply sad and finds it difficult to work, but might say, you know, I don't want to talk to a therapist. I don't want to talk to someone who didn't know him. I need something internal. You know? And that's the difficulty, is creating enough of a diversity of responses of different kinds of moments that everyone feels comfortable bringing up how they feel, discussing mental health, different platforms, different moments, different groups of people, formats, making everyone feel comfortable with the issue of mental health at the heart of the conversation. That takes work. Not necessarily a lot of money, but it takes work, time, thoughtfulness. So yeah, that's a full-time job.
And I guess that's why you have your position, right? So I think that probably we'll be seeing more and more positions like yours in the media companies, right? Yeah.
You just said, Jean-Marc, a very important point about, let's say, alcohol abuse, because it has been a stereotype of journalists. They drink, they smoke. And in my newsroom, I had to help 2 people to get help, like to go to therapy. And it was very difficult to guess the point where it's not just that they are drinking a lot, but and it's not just like because they are journalists and because they go to pub to discuss work and let the steam out. And I realized that this is also quite a big challenge because it's a generational issue, as you mentioned, but it's there, and we overlooked it for years and treated it only when the alcoholism gets so bad that you have to fire him.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. In a second, I'm going to open it up to the room to see if anybody wants to share any other solutions that you're trying in your newsrooms. But before we do that, I wanted to also point out to the fact that on top of the type of work that we do and the emotional load of the content that we cover, there are more, I'm going to put in quotation marks, mundane tasks around today's workplace that create stress. And I think that Jean-Marc, one of the things that you've been working on is on harmonizing your digital communications, because when you looked at what was causing stress to journalists, that was it, that we get messages from all these channels at any time. So could you speak a little bit more about that?
We're actually training our staff now to try and better use all their communication devices and systems and applications, because it can be an unnecessary source of stress. So and there are new rules being drafted at AFP now on what to use and what not to use, and trying to streamline all the different apps that we're using. When there's a new one, making sure that it doesn't come on top of all the others, but that we find a way of making that new one replace the old ones. Otherwise, you need everything switched on all the time. So choosing a certain app for a certain type of communication or a certain channel and sticking to that one, and just letting people know that that's the case can make a difference. Scheduling emails, we talked about it yesterday a little bit, but that can make a big difference. Some people will feel obliged to reply to an email even if they receive it at 3 a.m. And not everyone's always sleeping at 3 a.m. because we have a round-the-clock operation, so there's probably someone in the email group who is awake and will feel that they have to reply. It's just a sign of respect in a way, being able to do that. So we train people now on what are the new guidelines to communicate internally and try to reduce stress levels a little bit. And we also give, in the same vein of technical training, we train our reporters, especially those who work on photo, video, editing desks, and the social media and fact checkers, how to deal with violent images. Certain things just seem to be very obvious, but you need to hear them sometimes, and you need to feel that you won't be the only one implementing those measures. There's a whole list, and all of these tips are available online, but it's good to actually show your staff how to handle that. It can involve reducing the size of the image. If you know that you have a batch of very violent images coming your way, or that's a likelihood, then reducing the size of the image before you're able to determine whether that's an image you're going to work with. Turning the sound off, because that's often one of the most distressing things in video actually comes from the audio. Switching off autoplay on your social media feeds. There are all kinds of little tips to try and reduce the intensity and the duration of your exposure to traumatic images. And those are very useful and generally very well received trainings by our staff.
Thank you. So I wanted to open it up to the room to see if anybody wants to, before going into questions, which we'll get there, to see if anybody wants to share any other solutions or actions that you're taking in your newsrooms towards promoting a duty of care around mental health. And if so, just raise your hand because we have somebody helping with a mic. Here, in the second row. Oh.
Женя Снежкина, Free Europe, Free Press for Eastern Europe. I think that group sessions, psychologist session is not good solution for that problem in which we are, because I have observed some journalist groups several years from Ukrainian war started, and I recognize that if they start to talk with each other in the group, they are going to murder each other, because every time every human in this group can be part of minority or majority on this group. For example, that then Ukrainian war started. Some people was Ukrainian and other was another people. And if Russian language journalists are not supported, Putin and the aggression for Ukrainian journalists don't recognize other arguments ever. In one morning, Belarusian languages journalists started to be co-aggressors for Ukrainian, and they cannot speak each other about it because it was not their solution. Or okay, I'm sorry about my English. And after that, Gaza and Israel were started, and some of that group supported Israel and some of them supported Gaza, and it was several conflicts in one group.
Thank you for bringing the point that not all solutions work for everybody, and this is a important point that we need to make. And each situation is different, right? And whenever there are internal conflicts in newsrooms because of different things, it could also be conflicts of groups that hate each other, not because of what's happening, in general about toxic relationships in newsrooms. You have to be careful when doing group actions. So thank you for bringing that point. Anybody else wanted to share? Yeah.
Maybe add something to this. We don't always know what works for people. It's the nature of mental health, because it is a medical issue in a way. There are privacy issues, and so we don't always find out who does what, who picks up the hotline. We just get statistics at the end of the month saying this number was used 29 times over the past month from this region, but we don't know who. And I think when you organize a meeting, whether it's in your department with your team, in your bureau, or a group session, or if it's just between managers and employees, if it works for one person in the group, that's already something. And maybe the next meeting will work for another 2 people, and then maybe the online platform will work for another 2 people, and we don't necessarily find out. So I think that the idea of offering a diversity of solutions is really key.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. If we're talking about solutions and what worked, I just wanted to share something that may sound too simple, but it actually what works. And I'm Katrina. I work in Ukraine with safety mostly, and I worked as a war correspondent for many years. So I think in many different situations, journalists and like everybody else sometimes think that other people have bad intentions, and sometimes it leads to different types of conflicts inside newsrooms, between organizations, between communities. It can divide people really hard. So what actually works is when you try publicly or in private conversation return people to the assumption that people basically have good intentions. It's not always, something that people want to hurt you or make some, bad things. And it really helps to realize that we all human beings, and we have this in common. We don't want the world to collapse, right? So this is the like common good that we all intend to go to. Thank you.
When you say people, you mean the people in the newsroom, your colleagues, or
Uh,
people in general in the world?
No, it works on different levels, I think, because sometimes you just think that, okay, editor is saying this to me because he thinks that I'm working not so hard, or that I'm bad journalist, right? But you just maybe try to think that, okay, maybe it's not the right time, or not the right communication that was established between editor and journalist. Maybe we can try do things differently. Maybe we try another type of conversation, another setting for the conversation. Just a little bit more of a good intention in mind, that we really want to make things better and not worse.
Yeah, the importance of developing empathy and talking about our shared humanity, especially with our colleagues at work. Thank you for bringing that, because we tend to think that the main issue that we're dealing with in terms of mental health is, covering conflict, but sometimes it is the conflict in the newsroom, right? And those relationships at work that create a lot of stress. I want to open it up now to any questions as well that you might have for the panelists. So yeah, just raise your hand then. And we're going to get a couple of them, so to answer them in batches. Yeah.
Hello, I'm editor-in-chief at a digital newspaper in Spain. And yeah, we have to deal with a lot of stuff every day. And I had two questions. The first one is, how do we really know that is journalism what causes problems of mental health, and not the environment, I mean, everything that's happening? I have very young journalists that are dealing with mental health problems, and I'm not really sure that that problem comes from the journalism itself, but from the society which they are living, and well, they don't have great expectations in their lives and so on. So at which point should the media assume the responsibility of making all these people feeling better, which is obvious that we have to do it, but are we alone? I mean, are we the only ones that have to deal with this thing? And the other question is for Beata. And you have mentioned some cases of women journalists that have been tackled in your country, and this has happened in Spain also. And I would like to know what was the response of the society. I mean, if you found some support in society, because I think that that would be helpful for this mental health. Thank you.
Let's just get one more question, and for the sake of time, I would like to ask you to be brief in your answers. Yes, there, yeah.
Hi. So a part of security and safety, I'm still in a board and executive director for Ukraine media called Zabron Media, and I would say this one of the one of the biggest challenges in countries like Ukraine is to understand who suffers more. And I think this is more a question to AFP and maybe to your experiences, that when you have the war happening and when you have like a team of 40 plus people and all eyes on people who are actually go to the front line, who are exposed to the videos, photos, who work for this. But very often when you start to work with mental health issues, you understand that people who are most affected by this is just people who are not connected to this at all, being under stress all the time, but we don't know how do they go in for this. Maybe they're not as resilient as people who go into the front lines. So, and here's a question: how to figure out who's affected more, because you cannot actually gather anyone. And also, like talking about group sessions, it doesn't actually work when someone sitting next to the person who's working with the traumatizing videos or going to the front lines or interviewing people who've been victims. They think like, who am I to say that I'm actually exposed to trauma? I would rather be quiet. So what are your solutions for that?
Well, if I can briefly on the first question that came up around, is it the industry or where is it not the industry? I think the best thing that came out of COVID was mental health suddenly became this massive topic because we realized how isolation impacted people. And even in my previous job, which was in cinema and nothing to do with media or war or any of the kind of stuff I'm exposed to now, mental health was something that we looked at and addressed because there is life that happens, financial, divorce, relationships, whatever it is. I think where journalism comes in, it's because it comes in with all the things we've talked about, the exposure to the violent images or being on the front line, so your own personal security. So I think it isn't just about journalism, because we have people in the business who are not journalists who are suffering as well with mental health. But I think it's understanding that journalism plus having possibly, just everyday mental health is exasperated by what they are exposed to and the industry, what comes with it. So I don't think, I think you're right. It wouldn't be fair to say only in journalism, because this is a topic being discussed in every organization now. But I suppose it's been more conscious that you might have this and then you layer on the side that journalism brings as well. So it just makes it a bigger thing. And just to touch on the open sessions, I think you're right. There isn't one size fits all, as Jean-Marc said. But what we did notice from those open sessions was there was empathy and an awareness that wasn't there. So it might not have been right for me, but me just understanding you a little bit better, or understanding I might not have got it, like it didn't help me personally, but me being aware of somebody else helps somebody else. And I think there's something really useful. So one of the programs I'm running is how we can give back, because it's been proven that if you can give back, or in life has a real feel good feeling. And so I felt good knowing that I can't even relate to what people were saying, but being able to be more kind to somebody, or looking at them differently, I know has helped them, because people have made those comments. And so yeah, I hope that's answered some of that.
First, answering the question about the response, I publicly supported my colleague. I wrote several articles, and part of the hate was redirected to me. But most importantly, and that's part of what I would answer to what is the hope, that the president of Slovakia, Zuzana Čaputová, stood up and she publicly supported the journalist Zuzana Kovačič-Hanzelová. And she also openly spoke about the reasons why she not run for re-election. And she said that it was also the amount of hate she received. So she acknowledged that how severely that impacted the life of her family and daughters. And it was a powerful message. And also she created a network of influential women, bankers. There was a head of an oncology department, writers. I was involved as well. And it was suddenly a powerful message that from all parts of the society, women get hate. And now this group of influential women, whenever a female journalist is attacked or an artist, they are there to release a statement. And I think that this is like one of the strongest responses when a politician in such a high position adopts this issue and is there to openly speak about it, even when, because she was accused that she has this weak, soft voice, that she's not strong enough. But by that initiative and by her responses, she showed that there is a calm strength, and there is a strength in, that you don't have to shout and you don't have to try to match the attackers in the intensity of their voice and aggression. And I think that was something that resonated strongly with the society.
Thank you. We're running out of time. So last words, Jean-Marc, to close the panel.
Maybe just to answer your question, how do you know who's suffering the most? The short answer is you don't. But the only way I see of tackling this problem is to, again, it's the same idea, offering a diversity of solutions, both in their kind and also in frequency. It shouldn't be an opportunity that only comes up once a year for someone to put their hand up and say, I need help. It should be at the heart of the conversation. And I think if you develop enough tools and these tools are sufficiently diverse, it will create opportunities for everyone to be heard and express that need in a way that they are comfortable with. Yeah, that would be my way of going about it.
Thank you, Jean-Marc. Before we finish, I just wanted to tell you that talking about this and talking about solutions and seeing what works is part of what I think we need to be doing, and connecting in a global way, like we're doing today. And that is why at the self-investigation, we launched a few weeks ago the Mental Health in Journalism Summit, which is going to happen online. It's free in October. So, and you have the details there. You also have the details in these cards that you have at the entrance with a QR code. So just know that that's where we want to continue the conversation and start learning from each other and supporting each other so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Thank you so much, Jean-Marc, Lynn, and Beata, for sharing your experiences, and hopefully we gave you some ideas to bring back to your newsrooms. Gracias.
Friday program here. Really excited to introduce this panel briefly and our moderator in particular. Today we're here to really discuss questions in making local newsrooms sustainable. IPI has been running local journalism projects with the help of the Finidi Nauman Foundation. We have Thelma here for the first time in a while, so we're really excited about that. But these conversations are super important. Obviously, there's a lot of different types of local newsrooms around the world, and really interested to hear some showcases of what's working, what's not working. And we have Sarola Mekhab from the UNESCO in Paris, who is going to moderate today's session, and I will leave it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks very much, and thank you for inviting us. I hope it's my mic working.
Yes.
Hopefully it will be.
Yeah.
Great. So my name is Sarah McCabe. I'm Deputy Secretary for a program at UNESCO called the International Program for the Development of Communication. UNESCO, as hopefully some of you know, is the UN agency mandated to promote freedom of expression and access to information. And the program that I manage, the IPDC, provides grants, small-scale grants for media development projects implemented by grassroots media organizations in developing countries around the world. One of the areas that we have been focusing on in our work in recent years is the issue of media viability, addressing it both at the level of national policies that can be put in place to support an independent media sector, but also at the level of what business models can be developed by media outlets to face the serious financial difficulties that the media sector has been facing. So we have published a number of resources on this issue. I've left a few on the table back there, just as examples. Please feel free to pick up a copy. But now I will turn to the most important part of this panel, which is, of course, the panelists. And I'll briefly introduce them to you. So firstly, we have Isabella Moy, who's a Brazilian journalist, specialist in education coverage. She has worked for the newspaper Folha de São Paulo, and currently she is the CEO and is actually the co-founder of Agência Mural, which is a nonprofit, a local news organization that serves exclusively the low-income, underserved, and underprivileged communities in the greater São Paulo area. Next to her, we have Admir Joni, who is an IT specialist, digital content administrator, and project manager at the news portal UI Info. So this is an online news portal that provides information to local communities in both Montenegrin and Albania. So it's based in Montenegro. Then next up, we have Albina Vickovic. She's the Executive Director for Development and Innovation at RTV Slon in Tuzla, the third largest city in Bosnia and Herzegovina. She's also the author and editor of several TV shows and podcasts. Joining us online, we have Victor Pichuhin. We'll see if we're able to connect with him. Hello, Victor, can you hear us? He can hear us. So I'll briefly introduce
I can hear you.
Welcome, Victor. Victor is a journalist and media literacy trainer in Ukraine with a specific focus on tackling disinformation campaigns. And he's also the director of development of the media Nakipilo, whose stated goal is to create a healthy and free information space in the Kharkiv region of Ukraine. Now, I need to flag that Victor was to be with us today in person, but he was wounded in a Russian drone attack on Kharkiv recently, and he did not get the medical permission to travel. So unfortunately, we need to connect with him online. I would just like to express my full solidarity with you, Victor, and we're very pleased that you are at least able to participate to the discussion remotely.
Thank you for inviting me.
Lastly, we have Lera Laudan, who's the head of the Ukrainian local media development agency, ABO. So ABO has been developing 60 media outlets in towns across Ukraine with a total monthly audience of over 3.6 million users while also actively developing 7 thematic media outlets of its own. Yesterday, many of you attended the very moving award ceremony of the IPI IMS World Press Freedom Award and the Free Media Pioneer Award. Well, in 2022, ABO was the recipient of the Free Media Pioneer Award for its impact on the development of Ukrainian journalism in the conditions of war. So over the past few days, we've been reminded of the fact that the financial viability of free independent media is in crisis. And when financial viability is in crisis, so is the media's ability to serve the public's need and maintain editorial independence. I'll just provide you with a couple of key figures before we start the discussion, just to frame this discussion. So as you all know, the failure of traditional business models was heightened with the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. An Economist impact report found that the COVID-19 crisis had accelerated the decline of newspaper revenue by around 3 years. News deserts continue to grow, and local media organizations have been particularly impacted. Google and Meta are now receiving approximately half of all global digital advertising spending. And according to data from Zenith, between 2015 and 2020, global newspaper ad revenue dropped by half. So this is just, to frame the conversation. So the overarching question that we would like to address in this session is how, in the face of these challenges, local media can capitalize on their unique strengths and innovate to bring in revenue while safeguarding their mission and safeguarding their independence. We know that the unique value of local media lies in their close-knit relationship with their community and their ability to provide tailored and relevant content to their audiences. So to start off the conversation, I'd like to ask each of the panelists to summarize in maybe a minute or so what the unique value proposition that your organization has in relation to the local communities that it serves. So the elevator pitch, we'll start with you, please, Isabella.
Oh, hello, everybody. Thanks for having me. The elevator pitch is going to be... So we are a local news organization based in São Paulo, and we exclusively, as Sarah said, cover the low-income communities of Great São Paulo. Great São Paulo is a city of 22 million, like it's a metropolis of 39 cities together, and makes up to 22 million people. But when we talk about low communities, we are talking about 85% of these 22 million people. So that's how unequal our country is. And I think our value proposition is still that we are going to celebrate 15 years next year. So we started very small, but we started in 2010. We are still swimming in the blue ocean. It's like nobody is really caring about our audience yet. It's still neglected in terms of serving them with information that is useful and meaningful for daily life, and for them to see themselves as part of the city, as part of the rights that every citizen has. So we are simply doing normal journalism for a completely non-served audience. So I think that's my pitch right now.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you, IPI, for the opportunity to be in such a respectful panel. Thank you again. And as for local media, like you said, local media in the modern world have their importance, and their importance is connected with the part that they empower citizens. That they foster civic engagement and bring communities together. And when Portal Well Info, when we created Portal Well Info in 2013, that was the main motive for our future work. And I heard Isabella when she said that she covers a city with 22 million people, and I serve to the community with only 20,000 people. So it's a big disparity. But the main thing for us was to bring information related and important to that community. The difference, as I see, between local medias and national or international media is that they bring topics that serves or that are important in everyday life of the citizen, of local citizens, that can include local government decisions, environmental concerns, community events, and information that are related to the local community. One main thing, and I think that's the first bridge that we created to our communities, that our content was and is bilingual. So it's in Albanian and in Montenegrin. In that time, we were the only online media, or the first online media, and one of the rare medias that had the content in 2 languages. And despite of the informing all the citizens that live in our city, our intention was to create a social cohesion between the inhabitants or citizens in our community.
Very much, Admir. Please, over to you, Albina.
Thank you. It's really happy that I have this chance to represent my media outlet. Thank you, Ryan, for your call. Like you say, I come from Tuzla, third largest city in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and my media outlet is more traditional media outlet. Now we are in process of rebranding, and we want to, in our name, that we can include our digital media and our online platforms. I still believe that's really important thing. Most important thing is our audience, our publics, and I still believe that is most important that we work in public interest. For example, we usually work on research about what public think about us, and we have answer, you really care about our needs, our problems, and our issue. And for me, for my media outlets, that's why we still doing this job.
Super. Lyra.
Yeah. Hi all. My organization, 7 years ago, we launched our first 10 media outlets. Right now we have more than 50 outlets in our network. So we also, as you actually, we are working with small and medium-sized towns with population 10, 20, 30,000 people. Yeah. So yeah. And some of them right now is near the front line. 10 of these media outlets are in towns that right now is occupied by Russians. Of course, editorial offices, they moved, but we'll still continue to maintain all these websites, to update these websites on a daily basis. Yeah. So about value, yeah, I will talk in condition of war actually, because it could sound probably a little bit strange, but what we saw and what we understood, that right now Ukrainian local media, they got this, I don't know, chance or maybe opportunity to build a real trust between media and local audience, to show or to explain to locals a real value of local media outlets. What I mean? I mean that you know, a lot of local media outlets in Ukraine, the small media, they became, because of the war, they became really powerful, I don't know, stakeholders, players in their communities, because they are helping to solve different problems of people, to help local government from time to time. So right now they play a really huge role. So, and we understand it, we saw it, and we launched like pilot program right now in 10 communities in Ukraine. And we train journalists slash mediators. We called it like mediator. Mediator is a person who not just covers situation, but also help to build a healthy and productive communication between government, locals, local activists, community, etc. And I will talk about it more during the panel, yeah, because it's actually great.
Yeah, I'll be asking you questions specifically about that mediator initiative. Victor, over to you. And please also feel free to provide, share with us if you wish to do so, and not if you don't, any information or thoughts about your recent harrowing experiences.
Yeah, thank you. So I represent Nakipilo. It's a local media outlet from Kharkiv region, one of the biggest regions in Ukraine. We are working from 2014, and well, we are obviously talking about the war in the region. Our journalists are working on the front lines and in the city, filming the casualties of Russian attacks. Also, one of our main goals is to offer to our audience explanations, especially in those topics and areas where the state authorities, city authorities are under communicating and not providing enough information for people to make the decisions. Our audience is so used to this that when the state adopts some incomprehensible law, they write in the comment section, well, we'll wait until the Nakipilo will explain it in some big article. Also, our press center is a platform for discussions about the future of the city and the country. And from these discussions, the big changes in the region began, like in city planning or some social security changes, etc., etc. Also, one of our other goals is to be the voice of the people who need to be told about, especially in the border areas nearby the border, nearby the front line, because these people are not often visited by all Ukrainian media, especially in small villages. So we are covering their problems, and we are telling about these problems to the country, to the world, etc., etc. And obviously, we are not talking about only problems, but we are speaking about solutions, and we create articles in the solution journalism genre to provide solutions to our community. That's all.
Thank you very much, Victor. So while we are on the topic of Ukraine, I'd like to turn to you, Lera, to tell us more about how in the context of a full-scale war in Ukraine, where obviously the safety of journalists is a primary concern, but the question of how to survive financially in this context, in a context where advertising revenue has dropped dramatically, even more so than in other parts of the world that are not experiencing conflict. How in such a context have you been supporting local media organizations to remain afloat? And what concrete activities have you been implementing? And I'll allow you to also maybe develop a little bit more about that concept of mediator that you referred to in your introduction.
Yeah, thank you. You know, when I was thinking about this panel discussion, and I thought, okay, what could I tell? Something to tell that it's new for you. That because if I will tell something that you heard from conference to conference, okay, what else? So I don't have this magic, I don't know, bottom, and I can say that, okay, you know, we know how to earn money in Ukraine during the war in local media in small town. No, we don't have this decision right now, and of course international partners support us, and it's really, really important. In 2022 actually in 2022, I think a lot of Ukrainian local media outlets, they received this funding from international partners, and they received like extra funding. I mean, it helps them to hire one more people or two new journalists or something like that, or have more trips to make some reportages, etc., etc. But and what I saw, and actually I'm proud about it, because when they have a little bit sources than as usual, we saw the potential because they produced really high quality materials, and it was great. Right now this the support from international partners goes down, but it's also okay because we understand that it will happen in that way. Yeah, but so they just do what they can do with their sources and these situations. Yeah, but what I would it was a question about money. Yeah, so
about how what concrete activities you're implementing to support them.
But one more point. As I thought previously, I think that right now this local media, they built a basement for their future, because I strongly believe that future of local media is in future they should be supported by local people, maybe by also local, I don't know, taxes, local government. But in case if we will find this mechanism that allows this media to be independent, to stay independent, yeah. So, but it's a process, and we are pretty far from this point. But right now we built a basement because we can show what role could local media play in their communities. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Lyra. Victor, while discussing this issue, I'd like to see if you might want to bring in any additional perspectives regarding how local media organizations are surviving in this terribly challenging context, and based specifically on the experience of Nakipilo. And while doing so, could you enlighten us on the meaning of Nakipilo, why you chose the name Nakipilo, and how it reflects the needs of your audiences that you're seeking to address?
One second. Yes, thank you. Okay, a short story. Our media was created as a reaction to a revolution of dignity in Ukraine, and there was an information vacuum in Kharkiv region because there was not so much independent media. So we created Nakipilo Media, and Nakipilo in Ukrainian, it means when the people is fed up with something, boiled up with something. So it was the reaction of boiling inside the civil society, boiling against the corruption in the state, in some lack of security and law in 2013 and 14. So this Nakipilo is a reaction to the feelings of the people. And we are trying to be this reaction to what people feel now and trying to reflect their thoughts and emotions and what we are creating. But about survival and about money. When the full-scale phase of the war started and the advertising market collapsed completely in Ukraine, the team, like we tried to think in which areas we are good experts. How can we get the money? Obviously, we are supported by the international partners, by the European Union, but we know that this support, it wouldn't be forever. And we thought in which areas we are good experts, which competitions, which competencies the team has. Like we make great videos, we are good at communication, we are good trainers, we have like an excellent department for writing grant applications, we have a very good management system in our media. So we changed our direction and we began to focus not on advertising for business, but on consulting and content production for other NGOs, because NGOs, non-government organizations, they are even those that make like very big impact on society, they almost always don't know how to promote their activities. And as media communication specialists, we create for them promotional video articles and other content for such non-government organizations. We consult them, we help them to build stable structure, and that's become an additional and very valuable source of income that I could not say that it completely replaced the advertising income we have, but it helped a lot, and this niche we are trying to take is still growing. And also we changed the approach to work with the space of our press center, and now our community can organize here master classes, trainings, board game sessions, etc., etc. And this also became the other source of income that helped us to be stable and work for now.
Thanks very much, Victor. We'll go back in a little while to the issue of diversification of revenue streams. In the meantime, I'm going to now go over to Isabella. You work in a very different environment, but also at times challenging one. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit more about how your organization, by giving a voice to these underrepresented communities from the outskirts of São Paulo, how you've managed to create a community of interest and a sense of engagement and a relationship of trust with your audience.
Yes. It's a long story, but it's a long story as all relationships are, right? So we build up from scratch. And like the organization that we are now today, it's like 15 people at the newsroom, and we have this concept of local correspondence. So we have 70 local correspondents. It means so 100% of my organization, minus me, are young, talented professionals that come from the neighborhoods they're covering. Small cities or neighborhoods, communities that we are covering. So, and this network of 70 local correspondents come as well from those communities, and they cannot, like, we are an organization that we don't accept pitches from freelancers because you have to go through a process of training under our values and how we understand that we have to cover how we do local journalism, that it's like it's not from top to bottom. So it's our local journalism comes from like the citizens' voice and needs and what they're seeing in their realities, and then we make journalism. So I got a little bit lost now, but it's a lot of so having somebody. So now I got it. So having somebody that it's from the neighborhoods or the communities they're reporting about, understanding the whole context because they are from there. That's how you start building a relationship, and they become. That's why we call them local correspondents, because it's an analogy to international correspondence, that you are so inside the the soil and the context that you come up with all the nuances that a story has to have, and they start to be like the focal points for communicating everything. Like sometimes it's a story that they need to pass on, sometimes it's just like a citizen to wants to congratulate about, because if we didn't exist till now, like I don't be bragging about it, but like those communities, they have the mainstream media only reporting about the violence and the crimes that exist there, or sometimes what we call a good deed for a big organization that comes up with money and put up a soccer play field there, and 2 days after they're gone. So they don't really know what's going on in their community. So I think it's, as my colleague was saying, it's local journalism about also creating the possibility of belonging and sharing, and not only having the only two exits, which means like either you abandon the place or you're proud of something that is not good. It's actually really trying to transform it. And that's how we use information and the distribution of information. That's how we believe, that's how we trust, we build trust.
Thanks very much, Isabella. Another very closely related unique value of local media organizations is that they're really able to have a clear grasp on their audience's needs and interests, but also on their audience's habits, which may be shifting, especially in recent years. So I wanted now to turn to you, Albina, to tell me, and please then Admir, you'll have the same question, how your outlet has been using this information that you have about your audiences to inform content, to inform strategies, and possibly also to inform revenue streams.
Well, like I said before, it's really important to be close with our audience. And so many times we ask audience what they want to hear, to see, and we try to find how we can include our audience in our content. For example, like I say, we was more traditional media outlet. Now, in process of rebranding, we decide to include online audience in and our online media in one umbrella, because we know that our audience a lot of time spend on digital media, and we want to use that audience habits. For example, we create more digital content, and we try to make integration our radio, TV, and digital content in separate, different way to represent our information.
And concretely, in terms of engaging with your audience online, what strategies have you developed to, well, not only produce content online, but also create the sense of community that exists online as well?
We talk with them via comments or in inbox if we talk about Facebook, but we use ECR tools. That's tools which development by BIRN, Balkan Investigation Reporting Network. And our audience can write what they think about some issue, and they love that. They really love that. I think the people, the audience, just want to be asked. And of course, we have so close relation with audience, or phone, or email, or comments, like I said before. And with these tools, we create content together, and that's really important for audience.
Thanks very much, Albina. Admir, the same question I had asked initially to Albina.
In the beginning, I will try to give some context to the story. We all know that all medias, even local ones, like the main tool is the information or independent journalism. What we needed time to understand is that, and somebody said that in yesterday's panel, that good information doesn't mean good money. And that's obvious, and that's something that we all know, and we needed time in our media outlet. We needed time to understand and to watch audience as a community. That is important, and to see our media as a business. To do that, or to create community, it's a two-way street. The first way is that you need to create channels to communicate with your audience, and like Albina said, you need to have a good online platform. We developed even app for iOS and Android. You need to create diverse content for different social media network, and to know which audience is and how to approach to them. And also you need to create content. For example, we started to create video content because we thought that that's important to reach our audience and to closely connect to our community. The other side is to understand this process, not like we are talking or reporting to the audience, but with the audience. And one of the tools, Albina mentioned it because we were together in one Media for All project, is the ECR, or Engaged Citizen Reporting Platform, that is developed by Balkan Investigative Reporting Network. And that does simply that, gives the opportunity to the audience to express their needs, to give or provide for us documents, testimonials, pictures, video content, everything that they think that will help us reporting about the issues that are important for them, and in that way helping us to create close connection with our community. And that was not easy, and I will give you a personal anecdote with my staff. When we started, I didn't mention this, when we started in 2013, there were just two of us. Me with more technical IT background, and my colleague that was more with a journalistic career behind it. And many years we worked only like that. And when I introduced him, because I'm more data guy, and when I told him about this platform, he was quite of resistance, because he's old school journalist, used to have his sources for the information, and used to, let's say, treat the other side like an audience. But when we firstly tried the platform, he was totally surprised. And why is that? We need to see all the context of the story, where we work and where we live. We live in a country like Montenegro that has, or was, hybrid democracy. I think it's even now, where people are afraid of the authorities, are afraid to speak freely because they can have consequences about that. those consequences can be worse job opportunity, not advancing in the career, or simply having more inspection if you have some kind of business. On the other hand, we need also to know that we came from former socialist country where the omnipotent state is deeply rooted and where people think that states know everything. And even every critique that you have, they know, and then they will punish you. If you give your audience, in this case, your community, the opportunity to freely and secretly express their critiques, they will use that. And I think that's the most important bridge that you can create with your community, always knowing the context of the story, where you work and where you have your activities.
Of course, Sarah, please.
Yeah. So actually, these journalists / mediators that I mentioned already, they actually do not typical tasks for like general journalists, because, for example, they already hold around 80 in-depth interviews with stakeholders in communities, from local government and activists, etc., because these interviews, they are not for publishing, just for understanding and for analyzing different point of views, blogs, etc. So they had this like a lot of pages of these interviews. They highlighted pains, gains, jobs, and then we use all this data and insights in our content planning. It's like the first thing, but another one thing, they use this data for events and also public discussions, because as you said, it's important to not to talk with audience, but together, yeah, like not to audience but with audience, yeah. So and one editorial team, they also hold like small research, and they asked audience, okay, what public or social services do you need, and what services we don't have in our community but you really need it. And then they mentioned that a lot of people said we need something like bus or taxi for people with disabilities. And then it was like first step to huge communication campaign in this community, because the first step, they ask local government, okay, how many people with disabilities we have and what services we provide for them. Then we tested the services with audience. Then we ask, okay, we want to have this taxi, how much does it cost and what does it mean? Not in general, like we don't have money, sorry, but what exactly does it mean? We want to help local government to implement it. So the fund also people in neighbor communities, they already have the service, and they covered what does it mean to implement this service. Then there was a like public discussion with local government and government for this other communities and local activists. So we have this plan. And local government, the last one, local government said, okay, we don't have money. And journalists said, okay, you know, we could launch a crowdfunding campaign. Also, we could invite like popular bloggers, YouTube bloggers, and to gather money with them. They are ready to do it. So we just like push government and different stakeholders and from others to do something, and we give them ideas. So like local journalists for us right now looks like that. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Dara. So that, I mean, you're very much emphasizing once again the public interest nature of local journalism, and solutions journalism was mentioned earlier on. So now going back to you, Victor, you referred to the diversification of revenue streams that has been explored by Nakipilo in the last 2 years especially, and the various other types of activities that you have been implementing beyond pure journalism to ensure your sustainability. So my question is, while those activities enable Nakipilo to continue functioning, is there a risk, and this is a point that Isabella made, and I'll be turning to her afterwards, of detracting the focus of news organizations from their primary purpose, which is public interest journalism? Like how much of your time and effort, energy goes to the other types of activities that you mentioned, generating revenue, and that are not strictly speaking journalism?
That's actually an excellent question, and it's quite a challenge. But we are, well, when we started to diverse and when we started to look on these sources of income I've mentioned, it was a big challenge because our journalists, our videographers, they needed to work, I would say 20 hours per day, because they needed to do their journalist job and to do also some this consultant or content creating job, and it was exhausting. But in some time we managed to make a more optimal and more and less exhausting model, and we started to engage other media professionals, not from our media. We found some freelancers that are helping us with this activities I mentioned, with NGO content creating for such organizations. And actually it's become easier for the team to work, and we gave job to even more people and to even more media professionals. And our team, which is I would say quite challenging for Ukrainian media during the war, our team not became less, but it grows with the time, and we really like it. And also we are just hiring more and more people, and also we are starting to work with more and more freelancers, and we are trying to like expand the range of our activities to get more income, and to make for our journalists the way that they can do only their primal work, which is reporting, covering, writing articles, etc., etc. So the short answer is, we understood that we need not to try to work to do all the work with our existing staff, but to grow and to expand and to find more people.
Thank you very much, Victor. So I'm now going to turn to Isabella, but just to give you a heads up that after this question, I'll be opening up the floor to questions from the audience. We'd really like to hear from you, so start thinking about any questions or comments you might have regarding the interventions of our panelists. So Isabella, I'd be very keen just to hear from you about your perspectives on this idea of how to maintain the core mission of local media organizations, also bearing in mind the fact that you are working for an organization where income generating activities are very difficult to envisage, in particular income generating activities that would involve any kind of financial contribution or involvement from your audiences, be it crowdfunding or anything of the sort, given that you're serving underprivileged audiences that probably don't have even enough to cover their basic needs. So
yeah,
over to you.
That's it. Yeah. Well, I do understand your point, Victor, and I think the challenge now is that you transfer the overload of work to the management staff. You have more freelancers, you have more projects, so it's you who's working probably 20 hours a day. So one of the things I'm very critical about that, because we keep hearing about the revenue stream diversification everywhere, but so we try to resist at our organization as much as we can. We try to educate all the partners that want to do partnership with us, and we are not talking only about grant, because grant making is also something that pushes us to do side projects, and sometimes it's not what our audience needs or what we are strategically have thought that the direction that we are going. So sometimes we had to go, sidewalk and do something because it's gonna bring money to do something else. But that's very time consuming, and it drives our energy and our expertise and our talent and our knowledge and everything that we can go forward to go sideways. And even with the commercial partners, we're trying to tell them that like we are important because of the work we are doing, and like really sustaining, sponsoring, or like just putting their brand together with us is something that it's gonna return them, with whatever adventures they're looking for. But if we diverse our activity and to do like, we are really trying to diversify within the journalism side of the story. So if it's gonna do an event, we really clearly state that it's going to be a fundraising event for the journalism. So we don't really do something in exchange, or we try to do as transparent as it is, and we haven't done it yet because we are still like very critical about it. But that's it, so we do have some partners that is started like with long relationships again, understanding that what is important is to support the journalists that we're doing. So we work a lot with showing the impact that we make. We have like an impact newsletter. So it's very like they know what we are doing and how the journalist is really like changing realities and educating people and amplifying voices that weren't heard before. And that's making the largest metropolis in South America accessible to more people, more than the 15% that were able to access the rights in their city before. So I think it takes time, but we are still believing that diversifying, it really has to mean maintaining your journalism time to do journalism, because that's the work we sign up for, which is not an easy one. But, yeah. So.
Thanks very much, and thank you to all of you for your inputs. Now I'm going to open the floor for any questions that you might have. Please introduce yourself before asking your question. Okay, over there maybe first.
Hello, Valeria, Media Development Foundation, Ukraine. Have a question for you all. What is the main revenue stream in your media? And if it is audience finance support, how big is this stream and how you maximize this audience engagement finance?
Who would like to start? Maybe Admir or Albina?
Thank you. Well, if we talk about my experience, for us is still TV. They give us more money for our content and for our sustainability. But we decide to talk about a really important issue on some different way. We know that we have a little space for marketing, but we and people and audience don't want to hear hard news. We decide to produce podcast about really important issue like women's right, and we decide to find responsible, social responsible company, and them include in our content.
On your primary revenue stream?
I would try and explain our revenue streams, or our business model. It's simple. It has from the beginning, it had two staples. The first one was ads or banners in an online platform, and the second one were the project grants. Now we have the third one. The third one is creating content for other NGOs and making their activities visible. I think that colleague from Ukraine had the same revenue stream or similar revenue stream. Like we all know, all NGOs need to have visible activities, need to have as much as possible impact they can have for their projects and their activities. With introducing video content to our media work, we created the possibility for having that kind of revenue stream. The good part of these three revenue streams is that they are balanced and we don't have any supremacy of any of these revenue streams. The bad part is, for example, for the project grants is because they take you mostly off what you asked earlier from the main journalistic work. What we are trying to do now is to implement only the NGO projects that are closely related to media work or to create media content. In the beginning, we couldn't do that. We couldn't choose what we want to work or do because we are in the kind of way we needed to implement anything that we could, any grant that we could get at that time. Now we have that possibility, and we are trying to choose the ones that are with creating the media content. The first staple or the ads, in the beginning, it was really hard. People were used to use billboards, and they didn't quite understand that the visibility of their companies is good, and they thought only that they are helping us by putting the ads on the platform. But with the numbers, with the statistics, I don't like page views. I think that page views often take us in the different direction from the good journalism, but it's the good tool to get more revenue from ads and to impact businesses to believe that their advertising in your platform is profitable to them, and they are not helping you with that, but they are helping to themselves too.
Thanks, Edmir. I'd be very keen to get at least one or two more questions. So if you don't mind, we'll move to the next question.
Thank you very much. My name is Aaron Ainomugisha from Uganda. I head Rise News Uganda Network. We tackle unreported and unreported issues. Have keen interest in the vulnerable and marginalized groups, the LGBTQI, then other issues like community issues that are not tackled, including corruption, then climate change and other unreported issues. How can we be able to continue covering such stories without our government and other perpetrators choosing us for being pushers of the Western agenda? Because we are facing that, and that's a common issue across Africa. So how can we be able to deal with such stories without being accused of pushing the Western agenda? Thank you very much.
So would any of you like to respond? Of course, not specifically on the African context, but on the difficulty of reporting on certain sensitive topics that for which you might face reactions from your governments.
I think whenever you put sorry, I'm just whenever as much transparent as you can with how their story is going on, okay, like our organization is already, when it was born, of course, if we decide that we're going to serve only certain communities because they are underprivileged, because they are underserved, we had already made a standard, so this is where we are. But when we are reporting, we try to do it as neutral and with a lot of as much context and details that we can, because as you know, the more facts we put in the story, the more the less adjectives and the less militant you are, and the more descriptive of the situation you are, I think that's when no one can accuse you of just doing something else, or just going against the government, or just pushing an agenda that is not yours. You're simply describing life how it is with the voices that are coming to you. So that's how we approach. Like, we cover a lot of sensible things. Like, in a country that is very known by its inequality, and with the richest city within the richest city in Brazil, São Paulo is the richest one. It's like 85% of those people are not certain that they can afford paying for a media because they have other issues. Or so we are talking about something that is very it's not comfortable for any local government or any regional government. So, but we try to do it as fairly as we can, you know, putting all the reality in the video, in a podcast, in a text, in a photo. So there is no way out. Like, they cannot say we are pushing an agenda that it's ours or somebody else. It's just the reality that we are doing.
Thanks very much, Isabella. I've received a sign that we unfortunately need to end. So, well, I guess we won't have time for any further questions, but maybe at least a round of applause for our panelists, and thank you, really. It was a pleasure sharing the panel with you.
Thank you so much, Sauro, for moderating a really fascinating panel on local journalism. And thank you, panelists, for an engaging discussion. Up next in this room, we will have a session called Under Fire, Unprotected, What Journalists Covering Israel-Gaza War Need Now. Upstairs, we'll have a session, Repression Without Borders, Transnational Threats to Journalists. Thank you very much.
Is it on? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to, this is actually the last of our panel sessions as part of the IPI World Congress. So thanks so much for sticking around with us. This last panel, the title has disappeared, but we'll focus on what journalists covering the Israel-Gaza war need now. Obviously, we heard yesterday, over 100 journalists killed since the Hamas attack on October 7th and the corresponding Israeli invasion. So we know that there's a huge journalist safety crisis that's taken place since then. We have 3 speakers here and 1 speaker online who will be joining us to help us understand how we can best support the safety crisis that's taking place in the region. So I'll pass it over now to our wonderful moderator, Ika Feder-Gotic, who is a moderator for N1 channel here in Bosnia, who will guide us through this discussion. Thank you, Ika.
Scott, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to be part of IPI Congress, World Press Congress. And thank you for the great job you've been doing for the past couple of days. And just a colleague maybe advice, chill, everything's fine. It's almost done. You've done a great job. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Ika Feder-Gotic. I'm a senior news producer and anchor for news channel N1 in the Western Balkans. I'm a part of international desk that covers all matters world. I will be your participating moderator today, since I have been covering Gaza as well. And today, that is exactly what we are going to discuss. What journalists are going through, what do they need in Gaza right now? My amazing speakers today experts in their field, will try to answer the crucial questions that we have when it comes to journalism in Gaza, when it comes to safety of the journalists in war zones. And today, Gaza will be our focal point. Before we go into it, before we dive into it, we decided that we will allow a couple of questions at the end of the session. I will let my speakers introduce themselves and tell you who they are and what they do. We'll start with Adeline on my left. Maybe ladies first. Yes, Wafa, go ahead.
Yeah, I like this privilege from time to time. Okay, my name is Wafa Abdurrahman. I'm founder and director of Filastiniyat. Filastiniyat is a media organization for youth and women. We focus on women journalists. We give them the priority. We provide every kind of support that you can think of. We work in Gaza and West Bank. We have our women journalist club that has 600 women members in Gaza Strip alone and 400 members in the West Bank. During the genocide, of course, we jumped in to provide all support that you could think of for men and women, from hygiene kits to dignity kits to special tents for women journalists reporting from hospitals. And most recently, for the past few months, we're providing cash support to journalists. So we will talk more about the safety and the needs, but here I am. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Wafa. Adeline?
Hi, thank you for having me here. Thank you guys for attending this. It's a privilege to talk about this. And my name is Adelin Petrișor. I'm international correspondent with the Romanian broadcaster, Romanian Public TV, TVR. I hope I'm still a young adult. I have 40 years old. I'm 40 years old and I'm covering wars since 20. My first war zone was Lebanon. I was covering this conflict from the south of Lebanon. And I was permanent correspondent in Israel and West Bank and Gaza in 2002, probably the bloodiest year of the second Intifada. I had privilege to talk with Yasser Arafat, to make interview with Yasser Arafat, and he was under the siege in Mukata headquarters. Also, I've met, I don't know, Bibi Netanyahu. I met Ehud Olmert. I interviewed Ehud Barak, the most decorated Israeli general. I tried all the time to tell stories from both sides, and I hope I succeeded well.
Thank you, Adeline, very much. Simon, I will go to you now.
Thank you very much. Also 40 years old, so
We're all 40 and we like to say we're
exactly.
young, but
So it's a 40 years,
that means something.
40 years old panel, but it's a very, very important issue. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Ayman Mhanna. I'm the director of the Samir Kassir Foundation. It's a press freedom and media development organization based in Beirut. We help with monitoring violations in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Palestine, providing safety support and safe hosting to journalists from across the MENA region. And we try to get involved in supporting independent media voices and helping them grow more sustainably and more safely also across the MENA region.
Thank you so much, Ayman. We have Walid Batrawi, who couldn't join us today in person, but he is there. It's 6 a.m. in Toronto at the time, and I hope Walid is not you're okay with that, Walid. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah.
Good morning. Welcome to the panel.
Taking into consideration my age, 55, I'm doing well. So compared to the younger panel members. Anyway, my name is Walid Batrawi. I'm an IPI board member, a journalist who has been working and covering Palestine. I'm Palestinian, of course, since 1991, since the war, the Iraq-US war, or the U.S. invasion to Iraq in 1991. That's actually, I started on the 16th of January 1991 when it all started. And then over that period until now, I've been covering the West Bank and Gaza. I've been in Gaza on several occasions, during the first Israeli withdrawal, during the Oslo Agreement, when Arafat arrived. And recently I'm writing a book, and I realized that most of what I had written about was from Gaza and in Gaza, and that has disappeared, including some friends. I wouldn't say I'm so happy to be on that panel because the topic is very hard. And one thing related to security, I'm a hostile environment and security trainer, and my last training that I delivered was in Gaza as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Walid. Thank you so much. We will go into it. I would like to introduce and do the opening remarks on what we are going to discuss here today. Just before the Congress opened, I had an interview with Scott Griffin, who is right there behind, and we spoke about what the biggest issue is for the journalists operating in war zones today, and that is the safety. A lot has changed. And first of all, we spoke about Sarajevo, Scott. We spoke about why Sarajevo, why Congress in Sarajevo. Sarajevo has a recent history of hostilities and of journalists being targeted. That was the first time probably that so openly journalists were targeted. They were legitimate targets, as they would say, legitimate targets. This is why Sarajevo is the perfect place to hold this Congress. So a lot has changed in the past 30 years. Safety of the journalists is no longer number one priority. And why is that so? We will discuss this today with the panelists. Over 100, last number was 114 journalists were killed, murdered in Gaza, Palestinian journalists. The little window that we have in what is going on in Gaza today, and with each journalist being killed in Gaza, we lose that little window of what is going in Gaza, in West Bank, what atrocities are being committed against civilian population. As well, we are losing because international journalists are not allowed to get in. Could have we done better? Should have we done better as international journalists? We will discuss that too. The ongoing war created a severe safety crisis for the journalists. That will be our focal point today. I would like to talk also about female journalists. Why aren't female journalists in the forefront when we discuss journalists and their safety? What is happening? What do they need? What can we give them? How can we tell their stories? What can we do as Western foreign media, and what can we do to protect them? Is it time that we tell the truth, what is going on, or are we going to stay and keep the political correctness when it comes to killing journalists in Gaza? I'm done with political correctness. I want to talk the truth today. Wafa, I would like to start with you, and I would like to start with female journalists. We had an opportunity to listen to Yumna Saeed when she told her story as well. Let's open this session right now. Let's talk about the safety risks of Palestinian journalists who've been losing their family members and showing resilience in their reporting. They lose family members and they're back in the field because they need to tell what is going on. If they're not doing it, no one will know. Wafa.
Talking safety nowadays in Gaza, it feels like a joke, and a joke that doesn't make you laugh. Because with the helmets, with the vests, and everybody is talking about that, with the Israeli scale of war on Gaza, they're simply dropping 100 kilos of bombs. So what the vest and helmet will do, like this is the minimum that we can talk when it comes to safety. What's more important for me is the choices that the women journalists had to make at the beginning of the genocide. And that was a tough choice, whether to go report or to stay and take care of their families. Because as you put it correctly, it wasn't only the journalists who were targeted, but their families. And for women, they had to make this tough choice to protect their families. That was at the beginning, the first few months. But then another choice had to be made. We need to take care of the families, but we also need to earn our living. There wasn't food, there wasn't clean water, there wasn't enough cash. We were in a changing season from summer to winter, no warm clothes for the children, no medicine, nothing. And as I think this is not the case only in Palestine, but everywhere, the women are the nurses, the psychologists, the ones who are taking care of the elderly and the children and everybody. So with women journalists, they had to continue their reporting. They had to continue caring for their families and running with their families. What safety training you would provide to them? What safety? I've been to so many safety trainings. I cannot imagine how we can design a safety training to provide to our women journalists in order to keep them safe. Knowing from our survey that 72% of them had to evacuate their places more than once. We have one of our reporters, Yafa Abu Akr. She evacuated her place 10 times. And the last time she evacuated from a tent in Rafah to a tent in Khan Yunis. Even the tents, they're not available. And we're calling for having tents, having sleeping bags. This is like the basic needs before talking about the equipment for journalists. So with the situation there, I don't know, talking safety and talking psychological well-being, it sounds like something really bizarre and not realistic at all for women and for men as well.
I saw an interview of Motaz lately on TRT. I think it was that interview, and you can see the impact of what that did to him. Have you guys noticed that? the impact where he says, my only mission right now is not to live. I feel good. I have a survivor's guilt. My only mission right now is to sit here and tell you what's happening, because this is the only thing that's keeping me alive right now. And he's not in Gaza anymore. So the psychological burden that the journalists are bearing, it's unprecedented. It's unprecedented. We are going to talk about what is going on there exactly and what language we should use, Eamon, because we had a couple of meetings together before we sat here. We talked about the language that we are using. We talked about the international media, and this is why Adeline and me are here too. But Walid, I want to go to you right now. You said you lost friends, you lost colleagues as well. You've covered it. What do you think? What specific safety measures, just like Wafa said, what can we do? The helmet will not help a journalist to survive an airstrike. But what can we do? What safety measures can we implement? Organizations can implement. Can we pressure someone to do that? Who do we talk to make sure that the journalists are staying safe on the ground, at least if it's 0% now, at least to 2%, if we can even get it up there.
Thank you. It's you know, I feel really ridiculous about my trainings that I have done in the Gaza Strip in front of all this massive killing of Palestinian journalists. We've been trying to provide them with safety strategies, equipment, of course, that is still not fully provided in the Gaza Strip, and is being a signal, actually. You know, some of the journalists that I had spoken to, they said we prefer not to wear the flak jacket and the helmet because this is actually identifying us among others, although the Israelis have other means to identify people and target them. Many of the journalists feel, yes, they are being targeted. It's that feeling of, you know, wherever you go, you feel that you are being targeted, you're being watched. Drones are 24 hours, 7 days, of course, you know. I've been in Gaza and I know what the sound of that drone means to you psychologically, because you can't see it, but you can hear it. And that's something, you know, like buzzing in your head 24 hours, 7 days a week. And you feel that everywhere you go, you're being watched and you're expecting the next strike. So what can we do? I think that against this massive catastrophe of journalists in the Gaza Strip, I think these meetings are very important. Us talking about what's going on is very important. Maybe we cannot reach out to Gaza. We cannot go into Gaza for the time being, but I encourage every journalist to go to Gaza when the borders are opened. I also urge every journalist, every media institution to put pressure on the Israeli government with the cooperation of IPI, IFJ, Foreign Press Association in Israel and Palestine, to allow foreign journalists to get into Gaza, because that's how we can support Palestinian journalists who are working for 24 hours to provide a story. Now, I think the crucial thing is not to play safe in terms of editorial policies, not to have that political correctness. Statements that we issue should clearly focus on the suffering of Palestinian journalists and the targeting of Palestinian journalists, and not to go into political debates that would take us nowhere, because we want to be politically safe and try to balance and try to cover the story in a way that would please that side or that side. I think this is what we need in order to help our Palestinian colleagues in the Gaza Strip.
And we only have the Palestinian colleagues to tell us the real story. If you would agree with me, probably the international media has made so many mistakes in the beginning of reporting with this. I can confirm it. I've seen it. I've heard it. I've been part of it, unfortunately. I've listened to it. What is political correctness? Where do we draw a line between objective reporting and where do we draw a line between fair reporting? Now, what Palestinian colleagues did in Gaza is just to tell us what was going on and what is going on. And why don't we believe them? Now, this is one of the questions. Amy, I want to go to you. It baffled me personally. This is, by the way, this is the participating moderator thing that I was talking about. What baffles me is when we see what's going on in the field from the Palestinian journalists, we have to question it 10 times before we publish it. And we say, all right, we geolocated it, we can trust it, we checked it. But then we hear the other side just throwing out a statement and it's right there in the media, taken as a fact. Why are we doing that? Eamon, why are we doing that? What is that political correctness that we are sticking to and not believing those who are going through the worst atrocities of the 21st century?
Answer this question. There is a cynical answer very often is the accent. Whenever you speak English without your native accent, you're suddenly more trustworthy in international media. Whereas when you don't pronounce things exactly as it is pronounced on the BBC or CNN, well, you're less credible. So I know it's a cynical answer, but it's part of it. And it's also related to decades of actually being part of the media game, understanding how it works. Whereas when it comes to journalism that is coming from the region, I do not want to sound as if I'm bashing the victims, absolutely not, but the culture of good journalism is different in the sense that for many, many years, for decades, the most well-known and respected journalists were columnists and op-ed writers. The culture of reporting from the field was present, but at the same time, it would go through media outlets in our region that are completely owned by our local corrupt politicians or by political parties that have vested interests that are not about the truth, or regional networks in the region that also have their set of agenda. So this is what, although individual reporters could be doing fantastic work, but it would go through the filter of editing that is not as good. The culture of feature stories, of reporting live from the ground, of actually reporting about human stories, this is relatively recent with the emergence of a lot of independent journalists, independent media outlets that by definition, because they mainly operate online, do not necessarily have the same exposure and also have to go through the filter of big tech companies in order to reach audiences. So these are a series of factors that may have contributed to this. I just want to mention a couple of points related to the safety discussion that we mentioned, while totally agreeing with what Wafa and Walid mentioned. Let's go back, and usually I don't like to do it, let's go back to some UN documents, but specifically the UN Plan of Action on the Safety of Journalists, based on the PPP, 3P policy: prevention, protection, prosecution. We cannot think of safety without thinking about these 3Ps together, whereas most of our discussion on safety has only been about prevention, as in equipment and things like that. Well, each one of these 3Ps is lacking. The prevention aspect is lacking, but it's not only about the equipment. The equipment cannot help with the bombs, but prevention is also about decades of not building infrastructure that is protective. And this is something that applies to Palestine, but also applies to Lebanon.
Do you think that that's been done on purpose?
In a way, yes. In a way, yes. And this is why, while expressing my full solidarity with the victims of the genocide in Palestine, I am not a big fan of the powerful political parties in Palestine and in Lebanon that missed a lot of opportunities to prepare the infrastructure of safety for civilians in general. And this is a point that we need to look at some point. The second element related to prevention is not related to those absolutely who are victims of attacks and who are at home, but at the same time, some international media outlets working with freelance reporters on the ground, they also have responsibilities that haven't been fully fulfilled. When we move to protection, we're in Sarajevo. The concept of responsibility to protect, R2P, is extremely strong and actually was born because of the tragedy that unfolded in this place and also in Rwanda 30 years ago, and we're commemorating this. RIP R2P. It's been at least since the war in Syria, where atrocities against civilians and against journalists were on full display, and the world took a realpolitik decision not to implement R2P. So what happened in Syria starting 2011 is unfolding in its ugliest form today in the context of the war on Gaza, as the world has decided to abandon R2P, and it's practical. Are visas being produced? No. Visas are being produced kind of based on your connection with that media outlet, with that government. Where are all the big announcements that were made in New York 2023 World Press Freedom Day about the humanitarian visas of Germany, the Netherlands, Lithuania, Estonia? If not now, when? And finally, prosecution. If these crimes are not properly prosecuted, then the entire concept of safety would join R2P and RIP. R2P, RIP safety.
Thank you. Thank you, Ayman. That was very strong. Thank you for that. I want to go to you, Adelan. And when it comes to persecution, it could take decades. Bosnia and Herzegovina is one of the biggest examples that it takes a long time to prosecute crimes. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of evidence. It's a very dreadful process. I've been in The Hague following Stanisic Simatovic verdicts. I've been through the court cases. It takes decades. Persecution when it comes to Gaza, especially at least since October 8th onwards, might take decades. But we are here to remember. We have to remember. We have to tell the stories. I want to go to you, and I want to go to the international media. What international media has been doing, and this is exactly how we started our discussion. What can we do? I heard a speech of Yumna Said. She's a Palestinian journalist hero, awarded hero last night, rightfully so, where she said, everyone's talking about international journalists not being able to get into Gaza, but have you really tried? What have you done? Whom have you pressured to get in there? Whom have you spoken to?
The Western media, because I'm from the East part of the Europe, but I think.
Well, the foreign media then.
I think you are a little bit too harsh on international media. I just saw on CNN a couple of days ago a story about Palestinian detained in horrible condition in an Israeli hospital. I mean, I saw the same on BBC. I don't think you'll find on earth one decent journalist who doesn't want to go in Gaza yesterday. We've tried. I tried. I was there for 2 times. I was there immediately after 7th of October. I made stories with people in Israel, with family of the hostages, with family of released hostages, with everyone there, and I tried to go in Gaza. It wasn't possible. Yeah, I tried even going there with the IDF embedded. Was it impossible because we are a small outlet? You'll say, hey, embedded is not so okay. Yes, it's not. But you have boots on the ground. You can smell the death. You can see at least the destruction. And it's pretty much more than nothing. We tried this. I made an interview with the Israeli ambassador on our news channel asking, hey, how come we cannot go there? And the answer was like, for your safety. I covered Syria. you can judge, but I don't blame international media. I mean, I think we are too harsh on them. This debate is great, but I think would have been even better with an Israeli journalist there. I mean, I have connection in Palestine, in Israel. I was based there. I know a lot of Israeli journalists pissed off because they cannot cover Gaza. I mean, I understand their passion because they are involved. But us, international journalists, I think we should listen both sides and judge with the same measurement. At least TVR tried to do this. I mean, we had stories from Gaza. We have a kind of Romanian community there. It's a small one. Mixed marriages. And during communist time, during Ceausescu, a lot of Palestinians used to come in Romania for universities. And it's easy to find a Palestinian in Gaza speaking Romanian. And we made stories by phone, using WhatsApp, using these guys. Our government succeeded to pull out a couple of hundreds of Romanians, Palestinian Romanians, you understand me. And we made story with these guys. We tried, but we are journalists. We can.
I watched Talk TV, the way they were covering Gaza. It was worse than the Israeli media covers Gaza. You say you were in Israel interviewing the hostages and the released hostages. You couldn't get into Gaza. You could have got to the West Bank and asked us, the people in the West Bank who are originally from Gaza, what is happening. And I'm not here to judge you personally, because this is not a personal thing. No, it's about the responsibility of the media. It's what the media has done. It's what the media has portrayed the Palestinians. We were seen at the beginning as the terrorists, the savages, the rapists, and we had to defend ourselves against the claims of Israel that was repeated in the international media. This is first. And second, and this didn't happen in any conflict in the world. We had to prove that the bombs kill us, truly kill us. And this is not an act. And it's not colors that you see when you see the red color, the blood of our children, our women, and our men who were killed by the minute. No, the international media was complicit, and I say it with full faith. Later on, but after how many deaths, how many people had to pay the price for the international media to stop for a little bit and take a step back and think, those are humans. The people who are killed in Gaza are humans.
Do you know why I think that happened? There has been a point in time when that switch just flipped. I think when the people around the world started saying, oh, wait, hold on. hold on, those are not human animals. Those are children. Children on terrorists, potential terrorists. Let's freaking stop this. And I think media followed the popular voice.
Exactly,
Shifted when they
that was.
said, oh crap, excuse my language. I think we need to stop and we need to start reporting what's going on. And still, I still believe it is not fair reporting. I still believe that trying to mitigate the situation. Okay, we'll give a story about Palestinians, but let's give 3 stories about this.
Exactly.
It's still
the
not
proportion.
right.
And there is another thing that is very important concerning the balanced reporting. There is no balanced reporting when you're reporting genocide. There is nothing called objectivity.
May I say something, Wafa?
No,
before you
I
continue?
need to
Yes,
add
go
another
ahead.
thing. Why we're talking about balance and imbalance? One thing that I didn't see the media reporting, which is how the Palestinians and Gaza in particular was living before 7th of October.
Yes.
History didn't start on 7th of October. As far as we're talking journalists, in the war launched by Israel on Gaza in 2013, 17 journalists were killed. Have you done anything about that? 2014, 17 journalists.
And medical
16?
staff. Yes.
No, I will not talk about the medical staff and other groups. We're talking journalism here. One of them was a woman. 16 were men journalists, and one was international, Mazbout Walid, and one was an international journalist. Did anybody have a fuss about it or a campaign or anything? That was 2013. And when you look at the violations, till the killing, the assassination of Shireen Abu Akleh, you know how many journalists were imprisoned and were killed and were attacked? Nobody talks about it. Does the media report how many years Gaza was under siege? Not allowing certain chocolate to get in, medicine, different items were not allowed. This takes me to Ayman. I'm sorry. You're not happy with the political parties that they didn't prepare Gaza for such a massive war? Do you want them to build tunnels and, I don't know, buildings to protect the civilians? Gaza is a sandy land. This is first. And second, the amount of bombs dropped. Did you see how many meters they will go down the earth? 100 meters, 10 meters. What shelters could be done there? The issue is, and I know you have your heart is with Gaza and with Gaza people. But the thing is, I don't want to take the responsibility from the Israeli occupation. Israel is responsible for the siege, for the killing, for the death, for everything that happened to Gaza. And that was the genocide, the ongoing genocide is the cultivation of 76 years of oppression, colonization, occupation. We shouldn't shift from that. For me, this is the balanced reporting. For me, you don't have to talk only blood. No, you can talk about the Gazans.
Yeah.
I was reporting in Jenin, in Bethlehem. I know how hard it is to live
It's
in
not
a
about
refugee.
you. It's not about you. Yeah.
No, but you invited me here to talk what I was.
But you were defending the international media.
No, I said I'm not defending. Why you didn't invited a guy from CNN or BBC? Because I mean, I'm working with the news.
Yeah, this is IPI.
I'm working with the news, right?
No,
it's not okay talking in general. I mean, this is the biggest problem for a newsman.
We have to
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool, but you know.
First of all, I'll just be honest. N1 is a CNN affiliate in the Western Balkans.
Yes.
So it's a CNN affiliate in the Western Balkans. There's a certain editorial policies that we have to follow. N1 does it too. I do report on Gaza with all my heart and taking facts in consideration. I've been in trouble a couple of times. I know this is being filmed. I might lose my job saying this now, but I will say it. Before I go to Walid, before I go to Ayman and Adli, I'm going back to you. I will just say one thing. I want to reflect on what Wafa just said, taking in consideration Bosnian War. When Bosnian War was ongoing, there was this big sentence that was all over media, is especially after the war, 30 years after the war, even today, yesterday, the UN resolution on remembrance of genocide in Srebrenica was adopted in the United Nations with a very poor vote, but it has been adopted. So there's this one sentence that we keep saying every year when we report on Srebrenica, and that is, Europe, world, why didn't you hear us when we were screaming? And we are still very angry about that. Bosnian Herzegovinians lost their lives here and their families that are still here. And now the same is happening, and we don't hear them. What are we really doing? So why are we being so hypocrite? So even Bosnians, even Bosnian media, hey, you didn't hear us, and now the same is happening and we're not hearing you. I won't have it. I won't do it at the cost of my job. I'm ready for that. Walid, I want to go to you. You wanted to add something to Wafa's statement as well. I'm sorry, I know it's very early in Toronto, but I want to give you the chance to speak more. I'm very sorry for.
No, it's just I have I mean, as I have said, I've been covering this since 1991, and it is clearly that there is a deliberate policy by the Israelis, that does not always amount to the killing that we have seen. Since 1991, Palestinian journalists have been subject to a number of harassment policies and so on. One of them is movement restriction, in the West Bank, and I was one of the luckiest, actually, Palestinian journalists, because I am sitting on IPI board, because I work for international media and so on, to be able to go down to Gaza. Almost zero Palestinian journalists are, even before October 7th, were allowed to go into Gaza. I was born in Jerusalem, and I'm not allowed to go to Jerusalem unless I have a permit from the Israeli authorities. I'm not trying to make it personal, but imagine a journalist not being able to go to do work in Jerusalem, for example. Only few members of the Palestinian media, especially those working for international organizations, are allowed into Jerusalem. In 2002, before 2002, those working for international media were granted the Israeli government press card, which is the kind of, the holiest, I would say, card that a journalist can maintain and obtain in the West Bank, that would allow them to go and show at checkpoints and so on. But since then, Palestinian journalists have not been granted these press cards. IFJ press cards, the red one that is recognized all over the world, is not being recognized by the Israeli army at checkpoints. If they see it, they just look at it and make fun of it and throw it in your face. So it's not only about October 7th. And, going back to the panel, this is what I refer to in terms of political correctness. Why do we need an Israeli journalist to sit on the panel while we're talking about Palestinian journalists and the death and the killing and the murder of Palestinian journalists in the Gaza Strip? That needs to stop. This kind of, we're trying to be politically correct. In addition to that, I think which missed my mind at the beginning of the session, is that the immunity that is being given to those murderers, not only in Israel, but also all around the world. The cases that have been before in the West Bank and no punishment, with Shireen Abu Akleh, all investigations, the US investigation has named the Israeli officer who shot her. Did we see anything done by the Israeli government, by the international community, against this particular soldier who just pinpointed and killed her just in the neck? So that's the kind of, punishment is very important. I think we should not provide immunity to anyone.
And persecution, like you said, Ayman. I wanna go to you, Ayman, as well. You wanted to relate to Wafa's statement as well. I'm gonna give you the opportunity. We have 7 more minutes. We might take maybe 1 or 2 questions at the end, but we will have to wrap up slowly.
We'll have to go back to the discussion related to international media coverage.
Yes.
Yes, there was something that has changed late when public opinion is clearly changing. But what hasn't changed, unfortunately, is language. And we go back to what we were discussing very in the beginning. There are thousands of very good initiatives on social media that call themselves language correction initiatives. Palestinians are dead, Israelis are killed. Palestinians are asked to move instead of forced to move or displaced. Passive tense, specifically when we speak about the Palestinian victims, as if something happened, a force of nature forced them to do something, whereas there is an active tense when we talk about the other victims. So yes, there is a shift in coverage, and there are definitely stories that wouldn't have been covered in the past, but still there is something insidious that is continuing in the coverage that always kind of turns the Palestinian tragedy into something that just fell upon them rather than a direct consequence of criminal war crimes, direct war crimes. So this is something really major. So yes, there was a shift, and this shift is welcome, but this shift is not enough. However, I know I'm maybe diverting, but I cannot reach the end of the session without mentioning it. My fear is almost existential related to what will happen in the future. What we are looking at is a situation where a lot of that is putting organizations that are based on human rights, purely on human rights, organizations like mine that fully support what the ICC Prosecutor General is asking for, and every single commitment to human rights, we are in trouble, existential trouble. And it has nothing to do with funding. It has to do with the fact that we have to justify ourselves for using the 2 words human rights when we speak with our own community. Given what is happening in Gaza today, it's as if human rights has become a toxic phrase, given the fact that countries that pretend to be supporters of human rights have clearly abandoned the cause.
Absolutely.
So I need to justify myself to my parents, to my friends, to say, I work for a human rights organization, as if it's a joke. It's not a joke. At the same time, when we speak with our partners that have historically supported us in the West, some of them are, of course, very supportive, but we're also seeing electorally what is shifting. We've seen the elections in the Netherlands, seen the elections in Slovakia, in Italy. We're seeing what will happen on June the 9th in the EU Parliament election with the rise of the AfD in Germany, with the rise of the Rassemblement National we've seen Portugal, one of the countries that have nothing had. UK might be different electorally speaking, but it's a different story. The far right in Portugal, for X's sake, the United States in November. So even from a perspective of not only funding, public discourse, we're finding ourselves the new orphans, because those who pretend to support Gaza, those who pretend to support the Palestinian people, also most of them in our part of the world have the most dismal human rights record towards their own population, with hundreds of people killed in their own prisons, Syria, Iran. So who will be now giving lessons on human rights? So can we imagine the situation that we are heading into, like surviving 2024 in 2025, when there will be no prosecution for the war crimes in Gaza and the genocide in Gaza, where at the same time elections will bring to power people in the EU and in the United States and elsewhere who are actually totally okay with what is happening in Gaza, and at the same time have zero commitment to human rights all over the world and to independent media all over the world. And at the same time, as a reaction to the genocide, we'll have in our part of the world the most anti-democratic, anti-human rights parties and militias rise even further to power. That's contemplate what we're heading into. And the role of meetings like this one is to reflect beyond panels to strategies of solidarity and survival. Otherwise, we will all be in very different situations that would make the next war on Gaza, unfortunately, or on Palestine, or on southern Lebanon, or whatever Assad will do, even harder to document when local human rights organizations are weakened.
Let's see how much we can push it, right? Adeline, I'm going to give you a chance to, yes, go ahead.
Me to talk on my behalf. I mean, I was talking about what my station did and what I did. And we are talking about journalists in Gaza. They are in a shittiest situation, excuse my French, I mean, they are in hell there. We made stories without, out of Gaza, we made stories. We used the statistic of CPJ. Right now we have 105 journalists killed in Gaza and Israel and Lebanon, 100 Palestinian, 2 Israeli, 105 is the CPJ, the last. Two journalists and 3 Lebanon and 100 in Gaza. This is CPJ. We are sticking with the numbers from CPJ. And we made stories. We interviewed guys from CPJ regarding this, NGOs. We have NGOs in Romania, powerful, and we made stories. But my personal opinion is that one-sided debate, doesn't matter which side, wouldn't help this conflict. The schisma in the society will be bigger, and the outcome is going to be the same, the war.
I agree that, but we have to stick to the facts. And I think it's time we start believing and trusting Palestinian journalists who are reporting on the ground.
Excuse me. It's as if, and this has
and
been,
this is not a personal attack at all.
No, it's not personal. But this has been done all through the Oslo time and the peace time. We're not invited as Palestinians to any panel in Europe or in the US unless we have an Israeli present. We get our legitimacy of existence from the existence of an Israeli, and it's not acceptable anymore. You listen to us, you hear us, we're the victims for 76 years. It's time that we speak. We're not going into debate. This is not a debate. I didn't come for debate.
I didn't debate my rules. I mean, I'm working with the news. These are my rules,
I'm not
my
debating.
profession.
No. This is not really a TV show. We're talking to the journalists. We're telling the stories of our journalists. It's time to hear our stories once. You've been hearing the Israeli stories for 76 years, and our voices were vanished, were pushed aside. You cannot stand a 1 hour a Palestinian is talking. Give me a break.
I think you're exaggerating.
No,
I didn't say this. No. I
not.
didn't say this. No.
Our legitimacy doesn't come from the Israelis.
I was talking about the news rule.
I'm talking
I'm a
about
reporter.
journalists.
I mean, yes, I'm journalist.
Do it in your session.
I would like to end this session on good terms. These are 40-year-old. We are middle-aged people. I'm very sorry for this. I understand. I understand. I think
the one who has family in Gaza and who has friends. So I'm not reporting. I'm not talking on their behalf because once I met them or I have a few friends for a few months. No, my family is the one that is under attack and under genocide.
I feel sorry for this.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like, can we have a round of applause for my speakers, please, today? Unfortunately, we won't have any time for questions. Scott is looking at me nervously for the past 7 minutes. Walid, Ayman, Wafa, Adeline, Amika, thank you so much for being here. I think this discussion will go forward and move on beyond this panel as well. We will set something up and invite everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Yep. Thank you. Just thank you all to the panelists. Thank you to Ika. I do want to acknowledge, I think that, these are very complicated discussions. I want to thank all of you for engaging in this discussion. I know it's not easy. I know it's probably also not easy for many of you in the room. And I think I just want to end by noting that, as a press freedom organization, what we all can agree on, I think, is the need to protect all journalists who are covering the conflict, and especially journalists in Gaza, and repeat our call on Israel to allow all journalists to enter Gaza. So I want to thank all of you again. Thank you all for being here. We know this is tricky, so thank you for sticking with us.